Hello, curious minds, and welcome to Documentary for Sleep. If you've ever caught yourself marveling at how incredible the human body is, tonight we're going to take a slower, quieter step in the opposite direction. Because for all its brilliance, our bodies are also riddled with odd flaws, little reminders that evolution doesn't work like a master engineer, but more like a tinkerer patching things together. Whether you're lying in bed waiting for sleep, letting this play softly in the background while cooking, or just looking for a calm companion during a late-night shift, this is your space to slow down and reflect. This channel is not about fantasy or perfection, but about soft science, the deep past, biology, and evolution, told humbly and gently. We don't have all the answers, but we do have the fossils, the research, and the questions worth asking. And if you happen to drift off midway, that's completely fine. I've left timestamps in the description so you can find your place tomorrow, because the whole story from beginning to end is worth hearing. If you enjoy this kind of reflective, long-form science, something to help you learn, focus, or just relax, consider liking and subscribing. It helps this quiet corner reach more curious sapiens like you. And if you'd like, share in the comments where you're listening from, or how you use these episodes, in bed, on a night commute, or maybe while working with headphones on. And as always, stay curious, stay calm. The year is 1922. British archaeologist Howard Carter peers into the dark, sealed tomb of Pharaoh Tutankhamun. Flickering candlelight reveals treasures, gold, ivory, lapis lazuli. But hidden behind the glamour lies a brittle truth. The boy king's skeleton shows signs of clubfoot, scoliosis, and a shattered knee. A divine ruler, entombed like a god, and yet so humanly broken. Fast forward to today. The glow of computer screens replaces candlelight. Office workers everywhere shift in their chairs, nursing stiff necks and aching spines. We may wear suits instead of robes, but the fragility of our bodies remains the same. There's a common belief that evolution perfects us, sculpting our species with the precision of a master engineer. After all, we walk upright, speak in poetry, fly to the moon. But what if we've been looking at the wrong masterpiece? Let's begin with the spine, the proud pillar of human posture. Once designed for creatures that walked on all fours, it was hastily repurposed when our ancestors stood up. The result? A column forced to support an upright frame, compressing discs like worn-out cushions between vertebrae. Chronic back pain isn't a modern inconvenience. It's a deep evolutionary compromise. Studies show nearly 80% of people suffer from it at some point. The gift of bipedalism came with an invisible receipt: pain. And then the knees, the unsung heroes of endurance. Our ancestors chased antelopes across savannas, outlasting them not in speed but in stamina. Yet this miraculous mobility is built on a wobbly joint, vulnerable to twists, tears, and the slow grind of time. Compare this to a horse's knee, built to absorb shock, or a hyena's, evolved for resilience. Ours? A testament to a hurried adaptation, not a flawless design. The pelvis tells a darker tale. As our brains grew, so did our skulls. But evolution couldn't widen the birth canal much further without destabilizing the whole body. The result? A perilous gamble. Childbirth became an ordeal marked by screams, blood, and historically, death. Unlike elephants or chimps, who give birth swiftly and survive unscathed, human mothers often teeter on the edge of survival. What kind of design nearly breaks the body just to bring forth life? Even our teeth whisper stories of mismatched eras. Third molars, wisdom teeth, once chewed tough roots and raw meat. Today, they erupt like uninvited guests, crowding small jaws shaped by diets of soft, processed food. Dentists remove millions each year. What once nourished us now infects us. And then there's fat. The genes that once helped us hoard energy during famines now betray us in times of abundance. Obesity, diabetes, heart disease, these aren't failures of willpower. They're echoes of a survival strategy turned against its host. Our bodies are still tuned to scarcity, while our world overflows. So, what are we to make of all this? Biologically, these aren't random flaws. They're evolutionary leftovers, traits that served us once but now clash with our modern environment. Historically, they map the long road from forest to farm to factory, and psychologically, they expose a tension. We crave control over bodies built for chaos. Perhaps the real issue isn't that our bodies are broken, but that they were never built for this world to begin with. We inherited a skeleton for climbing, a gut for raw plants, a metabolism for hunger. But we live in cities of steel and sugar. It's not a mismatch between function and design. It's a mismatch between past and present. What if, instead of striving for perfection, evolution merely settles for good enough? Good enough to walk, even if it hurts. To reproduce, even if it risks death. To survive, even if it means living with constant discomfort. And so we return to that flickering tomb in the Valley of the Kings. Tutankhamun's twisted spine wasn't an exception. It was a mirror. In his body, and ours, lie the fingerprints of time, pressure, and imperfection. The truth is not that we were designed poorly, but that we were never designed at all. And if that's the case, what else about ourselves do we misread as failure when it might simply be history carved into flesh? If the human body feels like a patchwork, that's because it is. Evolution doesn't plan. It tinkers. Like a blind sculptor, it chips away, improvising fixes on top of old mistakes. We think of evolution as progress. But what if it's really just a desperate series of repairs? There's a tendency to imagine evolution as a perfectionist, refining life with care. But Charles Darwin saw it differently. He described evolution as a tinkerer, not a divine engineer. Take, for instance, the curious case of the human tail, or rather, the lack of it. Around 25 million years ago, a random gene mutation disabled tail growth in our primate ancestors. It worked, sort of. We lost the tail, but not without side effects. In modern humans, this glitch sometimes triggers birth defects in the spine, like spina bifida. A clean redesign would have eliminated the tail completely. Evolution, however, just hit delete and hoped for the best. Bipedalism, walking on two legs, was one of our most dramatic shifts. It freed our hands, letting us shape tools, build fires, paint caves. But that freedom came with a price. The pelvis had to shrink, twist, support new angles of weight. The spine curved unnaturally. The foot evolved a fragile arch. We gained uprightness, but inherited a long list of liabilities. Today's sprained ankles, ruptured Achilles tendons, and sports injuries aren't anomalies. They're signatures of this trade-off. Then there's the brain, our pride and peril. As our skulls grew to house-expanding neural networks, childbirth became a brutal bottleneck. The solution? Birth earlier. Human babies are born essentially premature compared to other animals. A foal can run within hours. A human? Helpless for years. This prolonged dependency shaped our psychology. It forced cooperation, parenting, and eventually, society. Our weakness at birth may have been the cradle of civilization. And yet, we're not the only bipeds. Birds do it too. Ostriches, penguins, and even the humble pigeon. But their spines are sturdy, braced by lightweight bones and strong musculature. Some birds can fly thousands of miles, then land with precision. Humans, in contrast, hobble with herniated discs and knee braces. Why? Because while they evolved flight and upright posture together, we simply stood up on a skeleton meant to crawl. Most animals walk on their toes or the balls of their feet. Humans are rare. We are plantigrade, walking on the entire foot. It's stable but slow, cushioned but clumsy. It allows long-distance travel, but makes us vulnerable to stubbed toes, fallen arches, and heel pain. Our very stride is a compromise. So what do we make of this parade of problems? Were we cursed by our own evolution? Or could it be that these flaws were the forge of our ingenuity? Back pain pushed us to create chairs. Difficult births gave rise to midwives, rituals, and eventually hospitals. The vulnerability of infants demanded the invention of childhood, of parenting, of extended family structures. Weakness bred culture. The inconvenient body forced cooperation. The awkward design became a crucible for innovation. Perhaps it's not despite our flaws that we built civilizations, but because of them. There's a philosophical irony here. The more imperfect the body, the more pressure there is to improve its condition. We didn't evolve perfect joints, so we built crutches. We didn't evolve fur, so we wove clothes. We didn't evolve safety, so we built cities. No other species has done this, not because they didn't want to, but because they didn't need to. So maybe the question isn't, why are we so poorly built, but rather, would we have ever become human if we weren't? It's tempting to long for a perfect design, to imagine a species without sore backs or risky births. But in doing so, we might also be longing for a species without philosophy, empathy, or art. If we had no need to adapt, would we ever have dreamed? We stand upright on a spine that's not meant to carry us. We balance on knees that ache under our own weight. We give birth through a passage too narrow for comfort. And yet, from these design flaws emerged fire, language, surgery, and story. Could it be that pain was not the price of humanity, but its very source? And if that's true, if weakness gave rise to wisdom, then what other limitations might be hiding untapped possibilities? If human flaws gave rise to culture, what happens when culture turns against the very body it came from? Our ancestors survived in harsh, hungry worlds. They ran barefoot across plains, slept on cold soil, and scavenged for every calorie. Their bodies were shaped by that scarcity, designed to store fat, crave sugar, conserve energy. But somewhere along the way, the world changed faster than we could. Today we live in cities pulsing with light and excess. Our fridges hum with abundance. Our days are spent not chasing prey, but chasing deadlines. And our ancient bodies, tuned for survival in forests and deserts, now stumble through the fluorescent jungles of modern life. The result? A quiet epidemic. Obesity, heart disease, and type 2 diabetes now plague millions. And yet these aren't new diseases. They're ancient adaptations gone rogue. The same fat-storing genes that once saved us from famine now choke our arteries. The urge for sweetness, once a life-saving signal of ripe fruit, now fuels a sugar industry worth billions. In biological terms, we are driving with Stone Age instincts on a superhighway of temptation. Stress tells the same story. In the wild, a burst of cortisol, the stress hormone, could mean the difference between being eaten or escaping. Fight or flight, sharp focus, heightened senses. But in the office, there are no lions. Only emails, deadlines, rush hour traffic, and yet our bodies react the same way. The system goes into overdrive day after day for threats that never pounce. The result? Burnout, anxiety, depression. A life lived under siege. Even our jaws tell tales of mismatch. Our ancestors chewed tough roots, tore meat, ground bone. Their powerful jaws shaped wide dental arches, leaving room for every tooth. But modern diets, soft, cooked, processed, require little chewing. Our jaws have shrunk, yet our teeth remain. The outcome? Crowded mouths, impacted wisdom teeth, rising rates of orthodontic intervention. We don't chew enough to earn the teeth we're given. All of this paints a strange picture. The more advanced our world becomes, the less it fits the bodies we inherited. It's not that evolution failed, it's that it couldn't see this future coming. Compare us to wild animals. Wolves don't get obese. Chimpanzees rarely develop diabetes. Tribes of hunter-gatherers today, like the Hadza in Tanzania, show almost no signs of these so-called diseases of civilization. They walk dozens of kilometers per day, eat unprocessed foods, live in tune with the environment their genes expect. So what changed? Perhaps it's not the human body that's broken, but the pace of the world around it. Evolution is slow, measured in millennia. Cities rise in decades. Technology evolves faster than DNA. And so we're caught between two timelines, the slow crawl of biology and the lightning speed of culture. We eat like kings, stress like prey, and live like gods in bodies made for gathering. Roots. There's a temptation to blame the body, to see our ailments as personal failures, as weaknesses to overcome. But what if they are symptoms of a deeper mismatch, an ancestral body wandering through a digital age? Even our pleasures betray this disconnect. Streaming platforms mimic the endless horizon of the savannah. Social media exploits our need for tribal approval. Junk food mimics the sweet ripeness of a mango tree, but without the fiber, without the effort. We're surrounded by illusions our instincts were never meant to resist. It raises a difficult question. If we've outpaced our own evolution, what does adaptation look like now? Do we slow down, return to some primal balance? Or do we double down, redesign the body itself to fit the world we've built? This is not a problem of willpower. It's a problem of context. We are not lazy, gluttonous, or anxious by defect. We are ancient survivors miscast in a modern play. And the more we punish ourselves for failing to fit, the more we ignore the deeper truth. What if the key isn't fixing our bodies, but fixing our environments? The city isn't a jungle. The office isn't a savanna. But our hearts beat as if they were. So the question lingers. Will we force our biology to catch up with our machines? Or will we slow our machines to meet our biology? And if we fail to choose, what kind of species do we become? Every generation inherits a body layered with secrets. We walk, breathe, and bleed inside machines shaped by a history we barely understand. And buried deep within us, like fading ink on ancient parchment, are anatomical riddles, silent witnesses to a long-forgotten past. Take the appendix. For centuries, it's been dismissed as useless, a leftover from evolution's messy drafts. Surgeons remove it casually, over 300,000 times a year in the US alone. But what was once seen as biological junk now whispers a more complex story. In our distant ancestors, the appendix helped digest coarse vegetation, storing beneficial bacteria and regulating gut health. Today, it still plays a subtle immune role, especially in childhood. It's not broken. It's obsolete, like a coal furnace in a solar-powered home. Then, there's the coccyx, the tailbone. 3 to 5 fused vertebrae at the base of the spine, curled like a fossilized question mark. In the womb, we all begin with tails. Most vanish before birth, but the blueprint lingers. Once, it helped our ancestors swing from trees, balance on branches, or perhaps simply swat flies. Now it mostly gets in the way, bruised during falls, occasionally inflamed, surgically removed. Yet it reminds us we are not entirely new. We are echoes, built on bones that once had very different purposes. And what about our skin? Soft, hairless, vulnerable. Our closest primate relatives are covered in fur. So why did we strip ourselves bare? The answer, it seems, lies in sweat. When our ancestors became endurance hunters on the African savanna, chasing prey until it collapsed from heat exhaustion, they needed a new kind of cooling system. Fur traps heat. Bare skin, combined with sweat glands, allowed us to shed heat efficiently. We became the best long-distance runners in the animal kingdom, not because we were fast, but because we could keep going. The cost, sunburn, chills, infections, a naked body is a gamble with the elements, but it's also a blank canvas for scars, tattoos, goosebumps, and stories. These aren't just curiosities. They are fossils in the flesh, reminders that the body is not a final product, but a palimpsest, each feature layered over the old. Evolution doesn't erase, it repurposes. The saber-toothed tiger's magnificent fangs could kill prey, but they were also fragile, prone to breaking. It died out when those teeth became a burden. Likewise, our own fangs, wisdom teeth, now cause more trouble than they solve, crowding our mouths, getting infected, requiring removal. A weapon turned liability. And yet, for all their apparent uselessness, these vestiges may be among our most valuable tools, not for survival, but for understanding. Each remnant is a clue, a breadcrumb on the trail of our evolution. Scientists study the coccyx to map spinal development. The appendix offers insights into the gut microbiome. Even the pattern of our goosebumps, once a reflex to fluff up fur, reveals neurological pathways we still rely on. What if these remnants are not flaws, but questions left open for us to explore? In biology, vestigial traits seem like nature's mistakes, but in history, they are archives. And in society, they are metaphors. A tail we no longer need, a gut we no longer feed, a layer of skin we must constantly protect. These aren't just medical trivia. They mirror how we carry outdated beliefs, ancient habits, and social systems that no longer serve us. How many of our institutions are like the appendix, once vital, now problematic, yet too embedded to simply remove? In a way, the human body is a museum, and evolution its reluctant curator. Each limp scar and odd bone whispers not just how we came to be, but why we continue to change. Still, these leftover parts raise a bigger question. If so much of our body is inherited from lives we no longer live, how much of our future depends on reinterpreting the past? The appendix, the tailbone, the bare skin, they are not problems to be fixed. They are mysteries waiting to be understood. And in trying to fix them, to erase or replace them, we may lose something more profound. The evidence that we are and have always been a work in progress. So as science advances, as surgery becomes sharper and genetic editing more precise, should we cut away these reminders of our origins, or should we keep them, not as burdens, but as teachers? And if we do erase them, what happens to the story our bodies have been trying to tell for millions of years? The clues don't end with bones or organs. They hide in behaviors and reflexes we barely notice. Ever wonder why we raise the hairs on our arms when cold or frightened? That response, called piloerection, once puffed up our ancestors' fur, either to trap heat or appear larger to threats. Today, it serves no practical function. Our skin flinches as if remembering a coat we no longer wear. It's not useful. It's haunted. But perhaps the most profound vestige is not found in muscles or tissue, but in our vulnerability. We lost our fur and gained the need for shelter. We lost our claws and sharpened stones. We lost our tails, our fangs, our raw physicality, and built civilization in return. Every step away from biological self-sufficiency forced us closer together. The weaker the body, the stronger the community. This reversal is nowhere more evident than in childbirth. No other mammal struggles to give birth like humans do. Evolution widened our brains and narrowed our pelvis, and the result was a near-fatal bottleneck. But where biology strained, culture stepped in. Midwives, birthing rituals, support systems, these became necessary. Pain made us cooperative. Risk made us ritualistic. And in that crucible of struggle, social bonds were forged. Even today, what we call defects may in fact be triggers of creativity. A body too fragile to hunt alone led to group hunting strategies. Poor eyesight gave birth to lenses, to optics, to astrophysics. Every evolutionary oversight became a challenge we answered, not with claws, but with questions. And yet, in the age of advanced medicine and genetic engineering, we face a dangerous temptation to eliminate every imperfection. We imagine a future free of pain, of flaws, of anything that betrays our messy origins. Why keep the appendix, we ask, if it might kill us? Why tolerate wisdom teeth or scoliosis or bad vision when science can edit them out? But consider this. If we remove every trace of where we came from, how will we understand where we are going? A world without vestiges is a world without memory. And memory, in biology as in civilization, is not just nostalgia. It is guidance. The very features we are eager to erase may be the ones pointing us to deeper questions. What diseases are hidden in these traits? What ancient conditions made them useful once? How did we adapt? What did we lose along the way? Even in the age of genomics, the human body remains more mystery than machine. Scientists still debate why the appendix exists at all. They still study the coccyx for clues to spinal injuries. They still wonder whether our loss of fur played a role in pair bonding, in skin-to-skin contact, in the very origins of affection. In this light, our anatomical leftovers are not just remnants, they are maps. And like all good maps, they reveal both where we've been and where we might be stuck. Because sometimes, vestiges don't just live in the body, they live in the mind. We inherit instincts shaped by primal worlds, fear of snakes, distrust of the dark, aggression toward outsiders. These tendencies once served us. Today, they ignite conflict, prejudice, even war. Are they evolutionary scars or survival scripts misfiring in modern times? If we accept that the body holds such vestiges, then perhaps we must also accept that our psychology does too. But what if we looked at all of it, the appendix, the goosebumps, the ancient reflexes, not as signs of failure, but as invitations? What if each mistake is a story half told, a thread we can follow toward better understanding? In a strange way, these old parts, useless, dangerous, outdated, are what make us human. They remind us that we were never created to be perfect. We were created to persist, and in persisting, to learn. This is the paradox at the heart of human evolution. The very things that no longer serve us may be the ones that help define us. So we must ask, do we erase these parts or do we reinterpret them? Do we treat the human body as a flawed machine to be redesigned, or as a living document still writing itself? Because somewhere in that decision lies the future of what it means to be human. Will we cut away the past in pursuit of perfection, or will we carry it forward, not as baggage, but as blueprint? And if we lose every scar, every leftover, every whisper of where we came from, will we still recognize ourselves at all? The human brain is a masterpiece and a liability. At 3 pounds, it is proportionally the largest brain of any primate. Folded, grooved, humming with 86 billion neurons, it is the source of language, art, memory, love, and the idea of love itself. We marvel at its achievements, writing symphonies, launching satellites, imagining gods. But beneath its glory lies a question we seldom ask. What did it cost? The story begins in the womb with a strange architectural paradox. As human brains grew larger through evolution, the birth canal, constrained by upright walking, could not widen further. The result? Birth became not just painful, but dangerous. For most of human history, childbirth was one of the leading causes of death for both mother and child. Other mammals do not suffer this way. Elephants give birth to massive calves without drama. Chimps, our close cousins, birth quickly and survive. But for humans, every birth is a delicate balance between life and death. The very organ that gives us intellect almost kills us on its way in. To compensate, we are born early, premature by comparison. A newborn horse walks within hours. A newborn human lies helpless for months. This extended dependence, though costly, is what gave rise to parenting, bonding, and eventually culture. The fragility of the infant demanded community. It required language. It created emotional ties as real as flesh. But the price doesn't end at birth. The human brain devours energy. Though it makes up only 2% of body weight, it consumes 20% of our resting energy. This metabolic cost means less energy for muscle, digestion, or fat storage. We traded brawn for brains, speed for thought. Our ancestors began cooking food to extract more calories. Fire became the silent partner of intelligence. Over time, the growing brain reshaped not just biology, but society. It demanded longer childhoods, complex communication, shared learning. It drove us into tribes, towns, nations. It made us capable of empathy and cruelty, and still, it is fragile. A minor bump can cause concussion. A small stroke can erase speech. Aging can cloud it, starve it, collapse it. For all its glory, the brain remains a trembling flame in a storm of time. There is a haunting irony here. The very organ that makes us human is also the one most vulnerable to dysfunction. Alzheimer's disease strips identity. Schizophrenia blurs reality. Depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, these are not moral failures. They are side effects of an overly complex machine. Consider this. No other animal suffers from existential dread. No deer grieves its own future. No sparrow questions the meaning of its flight. But we do. Our brains make us conscious, and consciousness brings suffering. Is this the final cost of cognition? Some scientists believe that mental illness is not a bug, but a trade-off. Creativity, imagination, and high emotional sensitivity, these traits often run alongside conditions like bipolar disorder or depression. In ancient societies, the shaman, the artist, the visionary often walked a line between insight and instability. Perhaps what we call madness is not failure, but the margin of genius. Other species are faster, stronger, more durable. Crows solve puzzles. Octopuses escape from jars. But humans alone build cathedrals, tell stories, compose music to mourn what we've lost. Our brain is not the smartest in every domain, but it is the most haunted. So then, what does intelligence really mean? Is it an evolutionary upgrade or a dangerous experiment? We often imagine intelligence as the pinnacle of evolution, as if nature's goal was to produce a being that could calculate, analyze, and philosophize. But evolution has no goal. It does not favor wisdom over instinct. It only cares that we survive long enough to reproduce. In that sense, intelligence may be an accident, one that barely pays for itself. And yet, we built everything on it. Cities, laws, medicine, ethics, all spun from fragile gray matter wrapped in bone, floating in fluid. Was it worth the cost? And if it wasn't, can we ever go back? Some evolutionary paths are one-way streets. Once the human brain began to expand, there was no return to a simpler existence. With each generation, the skull grew more complex, the childhood phase longer, the emotional range deeper. We became creatures who remembered pain and anticipated it. This anticipation changed everything. Animals feel fear in the moment. A gazelle flees from the lion. A bird flutters at a shadow. But humans fear events that haven't happened yet. Failures, betrayals, death itself. Our ability to simulate futures helped us survive. But it also made us anxious. The gift of foresight came wrapped in dread. And what about memory? Most species remember only what's useful, where food is, who's dangerous. But we remember music that made us cry. We revisit past arguments, rewatch moments of loss. Our brains are not just tools for survival, they're archives for meaning. This is where intelligence diverges from utility. From a purely biological lens, many of our thoughts serve no immediate function. Wondering about the stars doesn't help us run faster. Writing poetry won't make childbirth easier. But these seemingly useless abilities became the foundation of civilization. Still, we pay for it. A larger brain means a longer time to develop, which means children must be nurtured for years, making the survival of a species dependent not on strength, but on cooperation. The extended helplessness of human infants is unparalleled, but so is the complexity of our relationships. Could this have been the trade-off? Physical independence exchanged for social intelligence? It seems so. Human infants cannot feed themselves, regulate their temperature, or even hold up their own heads. But they can lock eyes, mimic expressions, cry in ways that trigger adult responses. From birth, we are wired for connection. This rewiring shaped culture. It birthed stories. Stories to explain where we came from, why we hurt, what lies beyond the horizon. No other animal needs myths. But we do, because our brains didn't just grow in size, they grew in self-awareness. We became aware of time, of aging, of death. That awareness comes with consequences. It's one thing to fear pain. It's another to realize you are mortal. Our ancestors likely buried their dead long before they planted crops. The act of mourning, of ritual, suggests a consciousness that sees itself ending. This level of intelligence is not universally adaptive. There is no proof that knowing you will die makes you live longer. And yet, it became the source of art, religion, and philosophy. But again, what a cost. A species that can imagine the stars must also imagine its own extinction. The mind that dreams of utopias can also spiral into despair. For every invention, a potential addiction. For every scientific breakthrough, a new form of self-destruction. No wonder mental illness is on the rise. Depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder. These may not be outliers, but reflections of what happens when a brain becomes too aware, too quickly. Evolution may have given us the keys to the universe, but it did not prepare us for the weight of holding them. Still, something remarkable happened in that burden. The need to care for vulnerable infants led to language. Language led to cooperation. Cooperation led to empathy, not just for kin, but for strangers. This expansion of concern, of moral imagination, might be the brain's most profound achievement. We are the only species that builds hospitals, not just nests. We care for the sick who may never recover. We create laws to protect the unseen. We write poetry for those long dead. All this because our brains outgrew their cages. But there is one final irony. For all our intelligence, we remain fragile creatures. A fall from a few meters can kill us. A virus can overwhelm us. A moment of despair can undo decades of progress. We live in bodies that can't keep up with our minds, and minds that often cannot bear the truths they discover. So the question returns, is intelligence a gift or a mutation? Was it worth the pelvic pain, the metabolic cost, the emotional weight? Or are we a species teetering on the edge, too smart to be content, too flawed to be truly wise? Perhaps the answer is not to be found in triumph or tragedy, but in tension. We are both, a miracle and a miscalculation, a torch in the dark and a moth to the flame. And maybe, just maybe, that's what it means to be human. Not to have the answers, but to be haunted by the questions. So we ask, could the brain, our greatest tool, also be our greatest burden? And if so, what kind of species dares to keep thinking anyway? There's a certain cruelty in how disease reveals itself. You're standing in a hospital corridor. Fluorescent lights buzz softly above. Somewhere a heart monitor beeps. A mother waits outside the oncology ward. A teenager clutches an inhaler. An old man mutters about joints that no longer bend. We think of illness as a breakdown, as something that has gone wrong. But what if, in some cases, it's the price of being built this way in the first place? Let's begin with the blood. In parts of Africa, a genetic mutation helps protect against malaria. It changes the shape of red blood cells, twisting them into crescent moons. These sickle cells make it harder for the malaria parasite to thrive. But carry 2 copies of the gene, and the result is sickle cell disease, a painful chronic condition. A trait that once meant survival now means suffering. 1 adaptation, 2 outcomes. Evolution doesn't play favorites. It gambles. The same is true of the lungs. A gene variant common among Europeans helps fight off tuberculosis and pneumonia, ancient killers of crowded cities. But that same gene increases the risk of Crohn's disease, an autoimmune disorder where the body attacks its own gut. What once protected us from bacteria now turns our immune system against us. This isn't design. It's trade-off. Nature never gives without taking. And perhaps no trade-off is more telling than cancer. Cancer is not a modern disease. It's an ancient one, found in the fossilized bones of dinosaurs, in Egyptian mummies, in the genetic blueprints of almost every living creature. But why? If evolution selects for survival, why would something so deadly persist? The answer lies in longevity. Our ancestors rarely lived past 40. In a world of predators, famine, and infection, dying young was common. Cancer, often a disease of aging, had little chance to appear. But now, as medicine extends our lives, the weaknesses that evolution never had to fix begin to surface. The longer we live, the more cells divide. And the more they divide, the more chances for a single mutation to go rogue. In this way, cancer is not a failure of evolution. It is a side effect of our success. But the most confusing battleground is within the immune system itself. Once, it was our greatest ally. It learned to recognize enemies, parasites, viruses, invading bacteria, and eliminate them with precision. In the forests and plains where we evolved, this rapid, aggressive response meant life or death. Now, in a world of clean water, antibiotics, and vaccines, that same immune system struggles to find enemies, and sometimes in the absence of real threats, it invents them. The result? Allergies, asthma, autoimmune diseases, the body misfires. It treats pollen as poison, peanut dust as danger, healthy cells as invaders. It wages war on itself. The same system that once kept us alive now keeps us inflamed, swollen, suffocating. Is this biology or betrayal? Modern life is too clean, some scientists argue. Children raised in ultra-sterile environments are more likely to develop allergies. Without early exposure to dirt, microbes, and parasites, the immune system doesn't learn moderation. It grows trigger-happy. The diseases of civilization may not come from weakness, but from disuse. And again, the comparison returns. Wild animals versus us. Wolves don't develop type 1 diabetes. Wild apes rarely get arthritis or asthma. Even hunter-gatherer humans, living much like our ancestors did, show far lower rates of modern disease. Their bodies match their environment. Ours don't. So what changed? Maybe it's not just our genes. Maybe it's the world we've built around them, too fast, too clean, too distant from what our biology expects. If so, then the body isn't broken. It's displaced. It hasn't failed. It's simply been taken out of the habitat it was shaped for. And yet we continue to treat illness as the enemy. We speak of fighting disease, defeating it, eradicating it. But what if, in some cases, illness is not an intruder, but an echo, a memory of past survival strategies, a side effect of outdated strengths, a message written in pain about the compromises that got us here? So when we ask why we get sick, perhaps we should also ask, what did this protect us from once? And if we listen closely, what else might our diseases be trying to say? To ask what disease means might sound poetic, perhaps even absurd, in a world driven by science. But science itself is beginning to see illness not only as dysfunction, but as information. A misfire that tells of a forgotten battle, a pain that points to an ancient trade. Take autoimmune diseases, lupus, multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis. These aren't infections from outside. They are betrayals from within. The immune system, once the gatekeeper of survival, now turns its weapons on the very tissues it was meant to protect. And the question scientists ask is not what's broken, but why now? These conditions are overwhelmingly common in developed, industrialized societies. In hunter-gatherer communities, they are rare. Could it be that in the absence of parasites and bacteria, our evolutionary enemies, our immune systems become restless? That without war they invent one? This theory, known as the hygiene hypothesis, suggests that modern disease may emerge not from weakness, but from a kind of immune loneliness. An army without an enemy will find something else to fight. It's an uncomfortable idea. That our progress, our sanitized, urban, indoor lives, might be breeding the very sicknesses we're trying to cure. That our long lifespans, made possible by medicine, might reveal weaknesses nature never needed to fix. Evolution only selects for survival until reproduction. After that, it doesn't care. A disease that appears at 60, 70, or 80 years old? Evolution never saw it. And so we age into flaws that natural selection never sculpted. Osteoporosis, Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease. These are not mistakes. They're unedited drafts. That's the hidden clause in our biological contract. Nature promised only this, that we live long enough to pass on our genes. Everything after is extra. So when we ask, why do we get sick? Perhaps we are really asking, why do we live long enough to reveal what evolution never perfected? There's also the matter of inheritance. Genetic diseases aren't modern. They're ancient shadows passed from one generation to the next. Tay-Sachs, Huntington's, cystic fibrosis. Each is a molecular echo of a mutation that slipped past nature's indifferent filter. Sometimes these mutations brought benefits once. The sickle cell gene offered malaria resistance. The BRCA gene, now linked to breast cancer, may have once boosted fertility. But in modern contexts, the scales tip. The benefit fades and the cost grows. It's a reminder. Evolution is not about what's best. It's about what works, for now. So what does it mean, in the age of gene editing, to intervene? We are beginning to rewrite the code, to snip out disease, correct mutations, design resilience. CRISPR and other tools offer hope and raise questions. If evolution is a blind sculptor, we are beginning to take the chisel into our own hands. But do we know what we're carving? Fix one gene, and another may falter. Cure one condition, and we may awaken another. The body is not a machine. It's a history book. Every gene, every flaw, every illness is a sentence in a story still being written. And yet, we cannot stop reading. We scan our blood, map our genomes, predict our risks. We seek not just cures, but patterns, meaning. Maybe that's the final paradox. The same brain that evolution burdened with vulnerability now searches endlessly for the reason why. We are the only species that names its diseases. That builds entire institutions around understanding them. That creates languages, medical, spiritual, emotional, to describe what it feels like to suffer. Even pain, the most basic warning system, becomes something we try to explain, to others, to ourselves. In doing so, we transform disease from a private failure into a shared experience. We turn vulnerability into story, because at some level we understand. Illness is not an exception to being human. It is part of the definition. So perhaps the question is no longer, why are we so sick? But, what has sickness taught us? It has taught us empathy, caring for the ill, even when there is no cure. It has taught us science, seeking patterns where once there was only mystery. It has taught us humility, that even with intelligence, we are not immune to fragility. And perhaps most of all, it has taught us connection, that we are not alone in our pain, that what breaks us also binds us. So as we look into microscopes, sequence our genes, and debate the ethics of engineering away disease, let us also listen, not just to the data, but to the body's whispers. Because every illness is a kind of memory, and every scar is a kind of map. The world we live in wasn't found, it was built. Brick by brick, tool by tool, word by word. And at the heart of that building process was not strength, but limitation. Picture our early ancestors on the open plains. No claws, no fangs, no fur thick enough to protect against the cold. Alone, they were prey. Together, they became hunters. What they lacked in biology, they made up for in creativity. A pointed stick became a spear. A stone became a blade. A woven net became a trap. Each invention began not with power, but with absence. This is the secret story of civilization. Weakness as fuel for invention. Human bodies are fragile. We can't outrun predators. We overheat easily. Our young are helpless. But that frailty forged community. Where one could not survive alone, many could thrive together. The group became the new body. The tribe, the new skeleton. Society evolved as our second skin. Nowhere is this more literal than in the creation of tools, the spear that compensates for weak jaws, the pot that replaces the need for stronger stomachs, the wheel, the roof, the road, all extensions of the self. Technology isn't external, it's prosthetic. It begins where the body ends. Even medicine itself is a kind of engineering around evolutionary blind spots. We cannot birth children safely. Midwives and surgeons appear. Teeth grow in the wrong direction. Enter orthodontics. Vision fails. Glasses, then lenses, then lasers. Each innovation a patch sewn into the fabric of evolution's unfinished garment. But the deeper truth is this. Society didn't emerge in spite of the body's flaws. It emerged because of them. A baby born to walk immediately doesn't need protection. But a baby who can't lift its head, That child requires parents, grandparents, and eventually entire support systems. In raising the most vulnerable, we built the scaffolding for culture, language, law, empathy. And so we grew, not just individually but collectively. Our shelters got stronger, our tools got sharper, our words became symbols, then myths, then constitutions. And through it all, the body remained largely the same: awkward, inefficient, miraculous. If evolution shaped the body, then the body shaped society. Even now, we live with that dynamic. The flaws in our biology gave rise to entire industries: dentistry for crowded teeth, obstetrics for difficult births, psychiatry for troubled minds. Civilization is not the triumph over biology, it is the negotiation with it. And yet, this partnership raises a question. How far can we go before the tools begin to replace the body itself? Already, we wear clothes to survive winters we were never designed for. We live in skyscrapers, breathe filtered air, swallow pills to override our chemistry. Modern life is less a continuation of biology than a workaround. Civilization has become our exoskeleton. But exoskeletons are not without cost. As we rely more on technology, the body atrophies. Our ancestors walked 15 kilometers a day. We sit for 15 hours. Their backs adapted to movement, ours to chairs. Their immune systems fought real enemies. Ours attacks pollen and peanut butter. What was once a dance between biology and invention now risks becoming dependence. And yet, how can we blame ourselves for seeking comfort, safety, longevity? What species wouldn't use every tool available? The real question may be this: are we using tools to support the body or to escape it? That distinction matters, because if civilization becomes a crutch, we forget how to walk. But if it becomes a prosthetic, we learn to move in new ways. This is the knife's edge we walk, between evolution and engineering, between being shaped by the world and reshaping it in our image. And the most profound irony? The more we try to perfect the body, the further we move from the very struggles that made us human in the first place. There's a quiet paradox at the center of our progress. The stronger our civilization becomes, the weaker the body needs to be. We no longer require thick calluses. We have shoes. We don't need perfect eyesight. We have screens to enlarge fonts, lenses to sharpen light. Our bones can be brittle. Ramps, elevators, and painkillers await. The human body has, in many ways, outsourced its own resilience. But this raises a haunting question. If the body never had to struggle, would the mind have ever learned to think? The very existence of modern society may depend on those early limitations. If childbirth were easy, we might never have formed close-knit maternal networks. If we had perfect immunity, we might not have needed medicine or empathy for the sick. If our muscles never tired, would we have ever needed rest, ritual, or reflection? In this sense, every limitation became a doorway. Take the example of language. It didn't emerge from strength, it emerged from need. A fragile infant couldn't fend for itself, so it cried. Parents responded. Over time, those cries evolved into signals, then symbols, then words. We built language not to dominate, but to connect. To say, I need help. I'm afraid. I care. The most complex structures in the world, governments, religions, economies, can all trace their roots back to the simple fact that the human body, on its own, was not enough. But here lies the rub. If the body's flaws built society, what happens when society begins to erase those flaws? We now engineer children before they're born. We correct vision in a 10-minute laser surgery. We automate movement, outsource memory, silence pain. Civilization was once a response to the body's fragility. Is it now becoming a replacement? And if so, what is lost? Some would argue nothing. That to suffer less, to hurt less, to age less is an obvious good. But others might whisper, be careful. The cracks in the body are where the light gets in. Take away every ache, every fear, every unmet need. And what remains of the human condition? A perfectly engineered being may survive, but would it still dream? This is not nostalgia for suffering. It's a reminder that discomfort has shaped everything we value: friendship, invention, meaning. A child falls, and someone reaches to lift them. That gesture, the reaching, might be the origin of all civilization. Now imagine a world where that child never falls, never fails, never needs help. What kind of society does that create? One where connection is optional, where interdependence is a choice, not a necessity. And perhaps in such a world, something fragile but vital fades. The anthropologist Margaret Mead was once asked what the first sign of civilization was. She did not point to pottery or tools. She pointed to a healed femur, a broken thigh bone that had mended. In the wild, an animal with such an injury would die. But in a human community, others must have cared for the injured, protected them, fed them. Civilization, she argued, begins where we care for the wounded. But what happens when we no longer wound? Does civilization still need us? Or does it simply continue without the body at all? Already, we build systems that barely require human input: AI, automation, artificial wombs. The body, once the central problem to be solved, is becoming peripheral, a relic of a slower time. And yet, the body remains. It bleeds, it aches, it ages, and in doing so, it reminds us that we are not machines. We are stories wrapped in skin, stories of failure, stories of adaptation, stories of resilience born not from strength, but from limits. Civilization, then, is not an escape from the body. It is its echo, its prosthetic, its mirror. We do not transcend our biology. We interpret it. And so the final question becomes, if we could build a body without flaw, a society without pain, would we still be human, or would we become something else entirely? There is a peculiar kind of betrayal that stings deeper than any wound from the outside, when the attacker comes from within. Imagine this. A speck of pollen drifts through the spring air. It lands on the soft lining of a child's nose. In a rational world, it should go unnoticed, harmless, floating, invisible. But inside the body, alarms blare. The immune system mobilizes like an army under siege. Histamines flood the bloodstream. The child sneezes, gasps, eyes watering, lungs tightening. What is the body fighting? Nothing. And yet everything. This is the paradox of the immune system, the most powerful defense ever shaped by evolution, and yet, under the wrong conditions, it becomes the enemy. Allergies, autoimmune disease, chronic inflammation. These aren't rare malfunctions. They are becoming the new normal. And the culprit may be one we never expected, the world we've cleaned too well. Once, the immune system was a necessity of survival. Our ancestors were surrounded by parasites, bacteria, and wounds that festered in the dirt. Every cut could kill. Every meal carried risk. The immune system evolved to be aggressive, adaptable, ruthless. It learned to strike fast and without hesitation. But now, in sanitized cities and antiseptic homes, that same immune system grows restless. Deprived of real enemies, it invents them. It attacks dust, shellfish, cat dander, gluten, even the body's own cells: rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, type 1 diabetes, multiple sclerosis, diseases where the immune system, designed to defend, becomes a blind hunter. Why? What changed? The theory is known as the old friends hypothesis. Our immune systems evolved in partnership with a host of microbes and parasites, organisms that kept it busy, trained, balanced. Remove those old companions, and the immune system loses its restraint. It becomes hypersensitive, overzealous, easily confused. In traditional societies where people still live close to nature, such conditions are rare. Among the Hadza of Tanzania or the Simoni of Bolivia, autoimmune diseases are virtually unknown. Their immune systems remain calibrated by daily exposure to dirt, insects, bacteria. In the West, by contrast, the more sterile the environment, the more common the inflammation. It's not that our immune system is broken, it's that it is out of context. Once again, evolution left us a tool shaped for one world, and we built another around it. And so we return to the same question that haunts every flaw of the human body. Is this truly a failure, or is it simply a mismatch? We are fighting our own biology, but maybe the battlefield has shifted. The body isn't confused, it's displaced. But the consequences are profound. Autoimmune diseases don't just cause physical pain, they blur the very boundary between self and enemy. They challenge the ancient assumption that the body is a coherent, unified whole. In these conditions, identity itself frays. What does it mean when your own cells are seen as foreign? And what does it say about the world we've built? That the very systems meant to protect us now turn inward. Maybe the body is trying to adapt and failing. Or maybe it's simply asking us to slow down, to remember what it evolved for. The mud, the microbes, the messiness of life. There's a strange irony here. The cleaner we make our world, the more chaotic our immune systems seem to become. The suburbs bloom with manicured lawns and antibacterial soap. Hospitals gleam with sterilized perfection. Our food is vacuum sealed, our water triple filtered. And yet, the rates of asthma, eczema, type 1 diabetes, inflammatory bowel disease keep climbing. What if cleanliness, for all its benefits, has left us immunologically starved? We are animals raised in glass boxes, surrounded not by predators, but by possibilities of malfunction. The system meant to distinguish friend from foe no longer knows where to aim. And the pattern is global. Industrialized nations, wealthier, cleaner, more medicated, show consistently higher rates of autoimmune and allergic conditions. In less developed areas, even in the same country, children playing barefoot in the dirt, drinking from streams, wrestling with dogs, are less likely to suffer from these modern diseases. This has led some researchers to experiment with radical solutions, reintroducing parasites. In controlled trials, patients with autoimmune disorders have been deliberately infected with helminths, parasitic worms once common in the gut. The idea sounds medieval, but the results have been surprising. In some cases, inflammation dropped, symptoms improved. It seems the immune system, when given a familiar opponent, relaxes. Are we meant to live with a little dirt inside us? The thought is unsettling, but maybe it shouldn't be. After all, the body is not just human. Trillions of microbes live within us, in our gut, on our skin, in our lungs. This microbiome is not a flaw. It's an ecosystem, a community that co-evolved with us, shaping our immune system, influencing mood, even helping digest food. Remove these microbial partners, and we begin to unravel. Perhaps the real betrayal is not the immune system turning on us, but us turning on the ancient partnerships that kept it grounded. In this light, disease is not just biology. It is disconnection. Disconnection from the environments we evolved in, from the microbial symphony that once tuned our immune responses, from the ecosystems that once demanded bodily resilience, and the implications ripple outward. What if our society itself has become too sterile, not just physically, but socially? Isolated in air-conditioned rooms, behind screens, surrounded by synthetic surfaces, we are as disconnected from each other as we are from nature. Immune systems crave complexity. So do minds. And yet we have flattened the world into algorithms and antiseptic walls. Could it be that the body, in rebelling, is calling us back to something older, to complexity, to connection, to a way of being that doesn't see the body as separate from its environment, but as an expression of it? Because the truth is unsettling and liberating. We are never fully self-contained. The body is not a fortress. It is a porous membrane, in dialogue with wind, soil, bacteria, people. To be alive is to be in constant exchange. And when that exchange is lost, we begin to break down, not just as individuals, but as a species. So the next time the body rebels, when it flares or swells or chokes, it may not be simply an error. It may be a message, not of weakness, but of misalignment, not of failure, but of memory. A biological echo, reminding us that we did not evolve alone, that we were never meant to live in isolation, from dirt, from danger, from one another. And perhaps the real danger is not that our immune system has turned against us, but that we've turned so far away from where we came from, we can no longer recognize what it's trying to defend. Not all costs wear name tags. Some enter quietly, tucked inside the spiral of our DNA like stowaways. Others wear the face of beauty, strength, even intelligence, until their shadows appear generations later. Evolution is not a gift giver, it is a deal maker, and every deal comes with a trade. For every advantage the body gains, something else is often lost. Not in a dramatic instant, but slowly, subtly, across centuries. This is the hidden cost of adaptation, the unseen compromise stitched into the very fabric of survival. Take a single gene, a sequence of just a few base pairs. In parts of sub-Saharan Africa, that gene mutation protects carriers from malaria, one of the deadliest diseases in human history. But carry 2 copies of that same gene, and it twists your red blood cells into sickles. Those cells clog vessels, starve organs, cause chronic pain, strokes, and early death. Why didn't evolution remove this deadly trait? Because in the arms race of survival, the short-term gain outweighed the long-term cost. A child with 1 copy of the gene was more likely to survive malaria. A child with 2 was collateral. This isn't an anomaly, it's a principle. The same genes that once protected our ancestors often become liabilities in today's world. A mutation that helped early humans store fat during times of famine now contributes to obesity and diabetes in times of abundance. Genes that heightened inflammatory responses to fight infections now trigger autoimmune disorders. Even high testosterone, once linked to reproductive success, is now associated with heart disease and behavioral disorders. Each so-called flaw is often the flip side of an ancient strength. This evolutionary compromise is known as a trade-off, and nature is full of them. Look at height. Taller individuals may attract more mates, be perceived as leaders, reach higher branches, but they also suffer more spinal compression, higher rates of certain cancers, and greater stress on the cardiovascular system. Muscular strength? It increases metabolic demand. A powerful frame is harder to maintain, especially in times of scarcity. Even something as prized as intelligence comes with its own invoice. Numerous studies link higher cognitive function to greater susceptibility to anxiety, depression, and other mood disorders. The same brain that can write poetry or invent calculus may also spiral into existential dread. To think deeply is at times to suffer deeply. This is not failure. This is cost. Nature doesn't sculpt perfection. It tinkers, borrows, makes do. A mutation may spread through a population not because it is good, but because it is good enough to help someone survive long enough to reproduce. What happens after that? Evolution doesn't care. If a gene causes cancer at 60, but lets someone pass on their DNA at 25, that gene stays. This blind pragmatism creates what we call evolutionary baggage, traits that once had purpose, but now bring pain. The male peacock's tail is extravagant, beautiful, and a burden. It makes him more visible to predators, but it also makes him more visible to females. Reproduction wins. Survival risks are tolerated. In the lion, a thick mane signals strength, but it also retains heat, especially dangerous in warmer climates. Still, it persists. And what of humans? We evolved to walk upright. Our hands are free, our minds expanded. But now we suffer back pain, hernias, hip fractures. Our design wasn't re-engineered from scratch. It was patched together, repurposing structures meant for quadrupeds. We evolved larger brains, but had to be born prematurely because of the limitations of the pelvis. This means our infants are helpless, dependent, fragile. The reward was consciousness. The price was pain. Every adaptation is a question. What are you willing to risk to gain this? Even behavior carries evolutionary costs. Aggression once protected territory, ensured access to mates, repelled predators. Today, that same aggression leads to domestic violence, criminal behavior, warfare. The circuitry remains. The context has changed. Altruism, too, walks a delicate line. Helping others can build bonds, earn trust, secure alliances, but taken too far, It can make one vulnerable to exploitation. So we walk through life carrying ancient strategies in modern skin, and sometimes the strategy no longer fits the battlefield. We crave sugar, not because we're weak, but because our ancestors who sought it survived. Now that same craving fuels a billion-dollar industry of processed addiction. We fear the dark because our ancestors who stayed close to the fire weren't eaten by leopards. Now we fear emails, silence, loneliness. The fear has shifted. The response remains. This mismatch between old genes and new worlds is perhaps the deepest evolutionary cost of all. We are tuned for a reality that no longer exists. And the question that follows is simple but terrifying. Can we evolve fast enough to catch up with ourselves? Or will the very adaptations that once saved us now become the slow undoing of our bodies, and perhaps even our species? It's easy to imagine evolution as a ladder, a steady climb upward, from fish to reptiles, from primates to people. But real evolution is not a ladder, it's a maze, a series of shortcuts, detours, and improvisations. Sometimes the path forward is a trap. Sometimes success in one generation sows disaster in the next. This idea isn't new. Ancient philosophers noticed it too. In Greek myth, the tale of Icarus warns of ambition flying too close to the sun. But perhaps evolution has its own Icarus story. Traits that soared too quickly, burning up in new environments. The saber-toothed tiger's teeth were brilliant hunting tools until they broke too easily. The Irish elk's magnificent antlers signaled strength until they grew too large to carry. Both lineages vanished under the weight of their own advantages. What then of us? We are living longer, thinking deeper, reshaping the planet. But our design remains layered with these quiet contradictions, these evolutionary accidents that persist simply because they didn't kill us fast enough. The human foot, for example, is a marvel of engineering and a disaster of pressure. Flattened arches, bunions, plantar fasciitis, all symptoms of a system evolved for walking barefoot on uneven terrain, now forced into stiff shoes on concrete floors. An adaptation repurposed beyond its capacity. Even reproduction, the very engine of evolution, carries hidden tolls. Human childbirth is risky not just because of brain size, but because of narrow hips, a compromise between upright walking and bipedal balance. The result? Prolonged labor, high infant mortality throughout history, and now an entire medical discipline built to manage what was never fully solved by evolution. And perhaps no cost is as profound as consciousness itself. The capacity to reflect, to imagine, to question, is celebrated as the apex of human intelligence. But it comes with its own abyss. We are the only species that contemplates its own death, that suffers boredom, that invents reasons to feel inadequate, even in abundance. Mental illness may not be a malfunction, but a consequence of overactive cognition, of brains wired to detect threats in a world with few real predators, of emotional systems designed to bond in tribes of 150, now trying to interpret the noise of 8 billion strangers. And here we are, trying to navigate modernity in a body that was never designed for it. This mismatch has led to what some call evolutionary hangovers, inherited traits that now cause more harm than help. Traits like fat storage, acute stress responses, or inflammatory tendencies. They were once solutions. Today, they're risks. But perhaps the most dangerous cost of all is denial. We like to believe we are beyond nature, that culture has replaced biology, that technology has freed us from the slow crawl of genes. But every time we break a bone, catch a virus, fall into despair, we are reminded the body hasn't caught up. We are still animals, shaped by scarcity, misfiring in a world of excess. And evolution? It doesn't care. It doesn't promise longevity, fairness, or well-being. It only cares that a trait is passed on, that the body limps, breathes, crawls far enough to reproduce. Everything else is our burden to carry. But maybe that's the beginning of something. Because once we understand that we are not the final form, once we accept the price we pay for our strengths, we gain something rare: agency. We can redesign the spaces around us to match what our bodies still need. We can question the traits we inherit and the systems we build upon them. We can choose not to worship perfection, but to understand imperfection. And maybe, just maybe, we can stop asking evolution to make us flawless and start asking how we can live wisely with our flaws. Because the flaws are not failures. They are footprints. They are fossils. They are quiet signatures of all the places we've been. And if we trace them with care, if we follow their paradoxes, their pain, their poetry, we may just find what it truly means to be human, not to escape evolution, but to remember it and live in full knowledge of the price we've paid and continue to pay for the miracle of being here at all. There's a moment in every life, not marked on calendars, not noticed in mirrors, when the body quietly shifts from growth to decay. It begins subtly. A knee twinges after climbing stairs. The eyes strain under evening light. A forgotten name dances just out of reach. No alarms sound. No red flags wave. But deep inside, a clock ticks, not towards something, but away from what once was. We are used to thinking of death as the end of life, but the truth is more humbling. The body begins to break long before it stops. In evolutionary terms, this isn't a mistake. It's a strategy. In the wild, most animals don't live long enough to grow old. Predators, disease, starvation, they clear the stage before decay can set in. A deer with arthritis doesn't see winter. A mouse with kidney failure never sees a second litter. Aging is a luxury of the protected. And humans? We were never designed to live into old age. Anthropological records suggest that for most of human history, reaching age 40 was an achievement. Beyond that, few survived. Evolution, in its cold logic, selected for traits that ensured survival to reproductive age. What happened after was irrelevant. That's the brutal truth behind aging. Evolution has no reason to prevent it. It has no mechanism to stop bones from thinning, cartilage from wearing, DNA from fraying. And so, over time, our bodies become the record keepers of time itself. The spine compresses, the joints dry, the eyes cloud, the heart tires. Every cell becomes a clock, and yet we are living longer than ever. Thanks to sanitation, nutrition, vaccines, and medicine, the average human lifespan has nearly doubled in the past 2 centuries. But while society moved forward, the body's maintenance plan did not. The result? A growing number of years lived not in vitality, but in vulnerability. We now outlive the design limits of our own biology. This creates a strange tension. The human body, shaped for 40 hard years of hunting, birthing, and surviving, is now expected to endure 80, 90, even 100 years of sitting, typing, medicating, and enduring. It is not that we are aging wrong. It is that we are aging in a context evolution never prepared us for, and this mismatch reveals itself in waves. The knees give out because they were never built to carry this much weight for this many decades. The heart weakens because it was never meant to pump through 6 decades of stress, salt, and sedentary life. The brain slows, not out of cruelty, but because it spent a lifetime burning with thought, memory, emotion. And yet we call this process deterioration, as if the body has failed. But perhaps the body hasn't failed. Perhaps it has simply expired its evolutionary contract. And medicine? Medicine is now tasked with extending the lease. We replace hips, filter kidneys, stimulate hearts, manage memory. Every advance in healthcare is not a cure for aging, but a negotiation with it. A gentle, defiant, not yet. But this raises a profound question. Are we extending life or postponing death? And what kind of life do we extend when the systems of the body begin to unravel? Alzheimer's, osteoporosis, macular degeneration. These are not diseases in the traditional sense. They are the costs of outliving the evolutionary timeline. They are what happens when biology runs beyond the script. Even reproduction tells this story. A woman's fertility declines sharply after age 35. Men's sperm quality drops with age. These are not accidents. They are clues. Clues that the body never planned for the decades that follow. And yet now we expect full vitality at 70. We expect clarity, strength, agility, into what evolution once considered post-human years. So the real mystery is not, why do we age? It's, why did we start living long enough to notice? To age, then, is not a failure of the body, but a revelation of its boundaries. Bones grow brittle not because they forget how to be strong, but because the instructions that once built them have faded. Telomeres, those protective caps at the end of chromosomes, shorten with each cell division. Eventually, the code wears thin, the blueprint blurs. We call this senescence, the gradual programmed decline of cellular function. But programmed may be the wrong word. There is no grand plan to make us old. There is only a lack of pressure to keep us young. Evolution selects for traits that enhance reproductive success. Once reproduction ends, nature stops watching. That is why a genetic mutation causing heart failure at 70 can persist. It never met nature's filter. Why a disease like Alzheimer's, which strikes in late life, remains embedded in our species. Because for most of our history, there was no evolutionary incentive to stop it. And so, the body becomes a canvas of slow erosion. The skin thins, the immune system forgets, muscles waste, sleep fragments. Even language, so uniquely human, can slip away, word by word, like leaves in autumn. But amid this decline, something else emerges. In many cultures, age brings not just frailty, but wisdom. Elders hold stories, rituals, memories. They become keepers of continuity, guides through loss, witnesses to time. Perhaps this was the trade-off. We were not built to last, but we were built to remember. Even in traditional hunter-gatherer societies, post-reproductive adults often play crucial roles in teaching, childcare, leadership. Their continued presence benefits the group, even if it no longer benefits their individual genes. This phenomenon, known as the grandmother hypothesis, suggests that evolution did not abandon the elderly completely. It simply assigned them a new role: cultural transmission. In this sense, aging may be the birthplace of society, because it requires care, patience, interdependence. No elder survives alone. No aging body persists in isolation. The old draw the young toward compassion, and the young pull the old toward relevance. And so aging is not just biological, it is relational. It invites us to build communities that extend beyond utility. It asks us to value those who no longer produce. It demands a shift from speed to stillness, from accumulation to reflection. But our modern world resists this. We worship youth. We disguise age with injections, filters, euphemisms. We hide the elderly in facilities, far from sight, far from relevance. And in doing so, we forget what aging reveals, not just about bodies, but about time, history, and legacy. Because aging tells a story that no young body can. It tells of survival, of adaptation, of memory encoded not just in neurons, but in joints, scars, hands. An aged body is a living archive, a museum of experience. And yet, the pain is real. To romanticize aging is to ignore its cruelty, the loneliness, the slowness, the betrayal of once familiar limbs. To live long is to lose mobility, clarity, sometimes even dignity. The decline can feel like erasure, but perhaps the task is not to erase decay, but to narrate it, to let the body age in public, to let it teach, to let it speak. Because even in its weakening, the body remains truthful. It does not lie about time. It does not pretend to be invincible. It reminds us constantly that being alive means being in motion toward death. And that is not a tragedy, it is a condition. The end point is not the failure, it is the final punctuation of a sentence that has been writing itself from the womb. So the question is not, how can we stop aging? It is, what do we make of the time that aging gives us? If we listen carefully, the aging body does not only say, I am fading. It also says, I have been here. And perhaps in the end, that is the most human thing of all, not to endure forever, but to leave a trace, a wrinkle, a laugh line, a hand that trembles as it reaches for another. There is a kind of strength that looks like weakness until you realize how much it has built. Picture this, a child shivering in the cold night wind. No fur to trap heat, no claws to cut branches for shelter, just bare skin, a frightened cry, and two trembling hands. But those hands reach for stone, strike it against another, sparks, then flame. The story of humanity begins not with power, but with lack. We did not conquer the world because we were strong. We did it because we were fragile and knew it. The human body is, by most animal standards, unimpressive. We are slow, soft, hairless, vulnerable to temperature, illness, and injury. But that vulnerability became our fuel. Every shortcoming sparked invention. Every pain demanded a solution. We are not nature's best design, but we are its best improvisers. And improvisation gave birth to civilization. It began with clothing, threads to mimic the warmth of fur, then shelter, walls to replace the safety of caves, then weapons, spears to stand in for teeth, slings for claws, traps for speed. With each step, we compensated. We built what our bodies lacked. In this sense, civilization is not a triumph over biology, it is a prosthetic for it. Every human achievement, from fire to flight, from agriculture to algorithms, is at its root an adaptation not of muscle or bone, but of mind and community. We cannot hunt alone, so we coordinate. We cannot outrun predators, so we build fences. We cannot survive childbirth without risk, so we develop obstetrics. Medicine itself is a vast architecture of support for bodies never meant to last this long. Without antibiotics, countless infections would kill. Without glasses, millions would live in blur. Without surgery, basic anatomical flaws would be fatal. Even our most ordinary habits, shoes, soap, language, are scaffolding around a body that was never quite enough on its own. But the more we build, the more dependent we become. And dependence changes the relationship. Where once tools extended our capabilities, now they are beginning to replace them. Machines walk for us. Algorithms think for us. Pills regulate our chemistry. Air conditioners teach our skin to forget what heat feels like. We no longer adapt to nature. We reshape nature to fit our declining adaptability. And here lies the tension. What begins as support can become surrender. Take glasses. A marvel of precision, they correct genetic flaws in vision. But they also allow genes for poor eyesight to spread unchecked. Without them, severe myopia might be filtered out by selection. With them, it multiplies. Now multiply this logic. Hearing aids, insulin, asthma inhalers, blood pressure pills, all life-saving, all essential, and all quietly changing the evolutionary landscape. We are keeping alive what nature would once have culled. Is this progress? Or is it a slow drift away from biological resilience? This is not an argument against medicine. It is an observation of its consequences. And those consequences are profound. Without antibiotics, many of us would not survive a childhood fever. Without cesarean sections, millions would die in childbirth. Without mental health treatment, countless lives would collapse under the weight of thought alone. Civilization has become a crutch. But perhaps that's the wrong metaphor, because a crutch implies weakness, and weakness implies failure. But what if this mutual support between the body and the systems that carry it is not failure, but evolution itself? Maybe the next stage of human adaptation isn't in the genome, but in collaboration. The body never needed to be perfect. It only needed to survive long enough to build something that could carry it further. Seen in this light, civilization is not a crutch. It's a co-evolved partner. Like coral and algae, like bees and flowers, The human body and its cultural extensions have entered a loop of mutual dependency. The tools we've built are no longer separate from us. They are part of what we are. The clothes we wear are not decorations. They are a second skin. The homes we build are not shelters. They are surrogate shells. The medicines we take are not cures. They are rewrites of the body's ancient scripts. But symbiosis has its dangers. In a healthy partnership, both sides benefit. But what happens when one side becomes too weak or the other too dominant? If the body forgets how to do what the tools now perform, we risk more than atrophy. We risk amnesia. Amnesia of ability, of resilience, of limits. Already, many of us cannot sleep without artificial light cues, cannot breathe clean air without filters, cannot walk barefoot without injury. We have become creatures of climate control, Wi-Fi, and warning labels. Take away the infrastructure, and how many of us could survive? Not thrive, survive. It's a confronting thought, and it leads to a haunting question. If you strip away civilization, what remains of the human animal? This is not a call for primitivism. It's a recognition of scale. Civilization has not just altered our world, it has become our world. Our bodies now require civilization the way lungs require oxygen. Remove antibiotics and pneumonia returns. Remove agriculture and hunger returns. Remove electricity and darkness floods in. Not just literal, but psychological. We no longer live with our tools. We live through them. And yet, in this immense dependence, something profound has emerged. Culture. Because the body needs tools, but the mind needs meaning. Without civilization, there is no language to share pain, no ritual to mourn loss, no music to carry memory. All these, science, art, belief, arose not in spite of our fragility, but because of it. A body that bleeds gives rise to medicine. A body that trembles gives rise to philosophy. A body that dies gives rise to religion. So perhaps the true function of civilization was never just survival, but transcendence. To take the vulnerable body and build around it not only protection, but poetry. Still, the fear lingers. Are we growing weaker with every advance? If evolution once forged our species in the fires of hardship, does comfort now soften us into irrelevance? Maybe. But maybe not. Because there's another possibility. That weakness itself was always the point. That it was never our claws or muscles that made us unique, but our tendency to break, and our refusal to stay broken. Civilization is not the rejection of biology. It is its continuation, through other means, through community, through invention, through a refusal to let the body's flaws define its destiny. So when we look at glasses, at canes, at heart monitors and hearing aids, what we see is not defeat. We see the body reaching outward. We see a species that never settled for its limits. And the question we must ask isn't whether we've become too dependent. It's whether we've forgotten why we built these things in the first place, not to replace the body, but to honor it, to carry it forward, to let it continue, even when the world, or the genes, or the years say it shouldn't. There is a curious contradiction in the human experience. We navigate the world through a set of senses that are, by almost every biological measure, unremarkable. Yet, from these very imperfections, we've built the entirety of culture. Our eyes contain a blind spot that the brain quietly edits out. Our ears deteriorate with time and are limited in range compared to other species. Our sense of smell is weak, our taste limited to just a handful of basic flavors, and our touch, though widespread, often deceives us. And still, these flawed senses are the only bridge we have between our bodies and the world. They are the thin membrane through which we encounter reality, and even when they fail us, we do not falter. We invent. The human eye, for instance, is not only flawed in structure, it is backwards. Light must pass through a tangled mesh of nerves before reaching the photoreceptors at the back of the retina, as if evolution stitched the wiring from the wrong side. Other animals, like the octopus, have more efficient designs. And yet, it is the human eye that has gazed into telescopes and sketched galaxies, that has painted the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel and captured war and wonder through the lens of a camera. The ear, too, is a fragile mechanism. Subject to damage from sound, time, and trauma, its range is limited compared to many mammals. A bat can echolocate, a whale can sing across oceans, but the human ear struggles in a crowded room. Still, from these modest organs came the violin, the love song, the whisper of a mother to her child. The imperfections remain, but we build meaning around them. Even our weakest senses, smell and taste, are not wasted. Though dogs outsniff us 1,000-fold, a single scent can collapse decades for a human, triggering emotional memory more vividly than any photograph. The smell of old books, the taste of soup from childhood, the smoke of a funeral fire. These are not just chemical signals, they are time machines. Touch, our first and last sense, offers its own paradox. It can detect the faintest breeze across the skin, yet miss the growth of a tumor beneath it. It can soothe with a hug and sting with absence. A newborn deprived of touch fails to thrive, not because it lacks food, but because it lacks feeling. We are wired not only to perceive the world, but to feel connected to it through contact. And yet, with all these biological flaws, blind spots, hearing loss, sensory gaps, we do not collapse into confusion. Instead, we rise into creativity. Because the human brain does not merely record sensory input, it transforms it. It fills in gaps, creates patterns, assigns meaning. It takes a fleeting sound and makes it a song. It takes light and shadow and creates the illusion of depth, the idea of beauty, the threat of danger. The senses are only the beginning. The real miracle is what comes next: interpretation. This interpretive layer is where art is born, not in perfect perception, but in the space between perception and imagination. Perhaps this is why humans paint skies they've never seen, write music they've never heard before, sculpt gods from clay, and dance to rhythms that no other animal would recognize as meaningful. The limits of our senses do not constrain us, they provoke us. They create the need to represent, to symbolize, to reimagine. Our perception is not about truth, it's about experience. And experience, as humans live it, is not raw data, it's story. We don't just see red, we associate it with danger, anger, love. We don't just hear a minor chord, we feel sorrow, longing, resolution. Our brains attach layers to every input: emotional, cultural, even spiritual. The senses are just instruments. Meaning is the melody we impose upon them. This tendency to project significance onto sensation might be one of the most important human traits, and also one of the most dangerous. For while it allows us to create poetry, it also makes us vulnerable to illusion, bias, manipulation. Optical illusions trick the eye. Propaganda tricks the mind. A frightened animal runs from what it sees. A frightened human can run from what is imagined. We have evolved not just to sense, but to believe. And belief can be beautiful or catastrophic. Still, this imperfection is also what drives connection. We need shared stories to make sense of the world, because no one sees exactly as another does. No one hears precisely the same frequencies. The bridge between our isolated, imperfect senses is language, culture, art. Civilization itself can be seen as a response to sensory limitation. If our senses were perfect, perhaps we'd need no metaphor, no theater, no poetry. But because they are not, we gather around stories, paintings, rituals, and try to make sense of the gaps. The blind spot in the eye becomes the origin of myth. The weakness of the ear becomes the birthplace of harmony. Perhaps, then, our very humanity arises from this flaw, not despite it, but because of it. If we had perfect perception, if we could see like eagles, hear like wolves, smell like hounds, perhaps we would never have needed to invent meaning. There would be no ambiguity, no misinterpretation, no space for metaphor, but we don't live in that world. We live in the margins, in the missing data, in the subtle gaps between what is and what is perceived. And in those gaps, we created language, we created ritual, we created art. From the limitations of the retina came the urge to paint. From the dullness of the ear came the craving for harmony. From the coarseness of our skin emerged the tenderness of human touch, not just physical but emotional, symbolic, sacred. In this way, perception is not simply about information, it's about connection. Every sense, though limited, gives us a thread. And we've learned to braid those threads into something more durable than instinct, shared experience. That's why a whisper can wound, why a sunset can heal, why a song can unite people who speak no common tongue. Our senses may not be powerful, but they are meaningful. They are, in fact, more than biological. They are cultural. The way we see is shaped by what we believe. The way we hear is shaped by what we value. Culture feeds back into perception. An untrained eye sees brushstrokes. An artist sees tension. A child hears thunder and feels fear. A composer hears rhythm. The eye does not only reflect light, it reflects history. The ear does not only hear, it remembers everything it was ever told about what a sound should mean. And so, each generation doesn't just inherit a body, it inherits a way of sensing the world, a way of interpreting imperfection, and perhaps most poignantly, a way of making peace with it. Because our senses, though fragile, are enough. Enough to survive, yes, but also enough to wonder. That's what separates us. Not that we sense more than other animals, but that we are aware of the limits of our own senses. We know we are blind to certain truths. We know we are deaf to certain frequencies. We know we are not seeing the world as it is, but as we are. And that knowledge humbles us, or should. Science tries to extend these senses. We build telescopes to see what the eye never could. We craft microscopes to glimpse the hidden engines of life. We record ultrasounds, measure seismic vibrations, decode radiation from distant stars. Technology becomes a scaffold around the limits of our perception, just as language is a scaffold around the limits of our understanding. And yet, with every new extension, we are reminded of the same core truth. We are always sensing the world through filters, some biological, some cultural, some existential. The paradox is not that our senses are flawed. The paradox is that they are just flawed enough to make us human, not so broken that we cannot function, not so sharp that we become machines. They exist in a strange, beautiful middle ground, a space of approximation, of interpretation, of metaphor, a space where we cannot rely entirely on what we sense, and so must ask each other, did you feel that too? From that question grows empathy. From that doubt grows science. From that imperfection grows art. In the end, what makes our senses so powerful is not what they are, but what we do with them. We see not just with the eye, but with memory. We hear not just with the ear, but with longing. We touch not just with skin, but with trust. We perceive not just the world, but ourselves inside it. And in that perception, fragile and flawed, we begin to shape the one thing evolution never gave us directly: meaning. So perhaps the greatest paradox is this: that a creature evolved to survive in mud and shadow, with a patchwork of semi-functional senses, would one day look up and name the stars. Desire begins in silence, not with words, but with a signal, deep in the body, long before language was born. A drop in blood sugar, a shift in hormones, the faint scent of something once tasted, once needed. The body doesn't ask, it pulls, it hungers, and then the mind, slower and more dramatic, catches up and gives it a name: craving. But desire is not merely a biological function. It is the shadow of our evolutionary past, flickering behind every decision we make. What we want, and how we want it, is not just preference. It is memory, encoded in flesh, a sculpted response to ancient risks and ancient hungers. That thirst for sugar? It once meant survival during famine. The pull toward fat? It once shielded us from winter and war. Even the yearning for social approval, The need to be seen, desired, admired, has roots in tribal cohesion, mating advantage, and access to shared resources. Our desires were forged in scarcity. That is their origin story. And now, in a world of surplus, they no longer whisper. They scream. The paradox is brutal. Evolution gave us instincts for a world that no longer exists. It wired us to crave salt when salt was rare, to gorge when food was unpredictable, to reproduce young when death loomed early. And so, when that same wiring now meets the bright glow of supermarket aisles, endless digital attention, and algorithmic seduction, it does not recalibrate, it accelerates. Our metabolism of desire is not regulated by logic, it is driven by legacy. We are not greedy, we are ancient. But evolution didn't just give us needs, it gave us reward, and the chemistry of that reward is terrifyingly efficient. When we satisfy a craving, food, sex, validation, our brain releases dopamine, not as a gift, but as reinforcement. Not pleasure itself, but the promise of more. It is not the satisfaction that hooks us, it is the chase, the anticipation, the next high. This system, designed to make us persistent hunters, now makes us persistent scrollers, persistent shoppers, persistent worriers. In an ecosystem of abundance, the mechanism meant to keep us alive now threatens to hollow us out from the inside. Desire, once functional, becomes insatiable. And it doesn't stop with food or sex. It stretches into every domain: achievement, status, appearance, novelty. The desire to be envied, to be seen as enough, to be more than what we are. The ancient signals, once confined to physical needs, have been hijacked by symbols: a bigger house, a better phone, a more curated self. Desire has gone digital, but its engine is still biological. And here's where the second layer of paradox unfolds. The more we feed it, the hungrier it grows. Not because we are broken, but because the loop was never meant to end. In the wild, desire always met limits, seasons, danger, rejection. But now, in a society designed to remove friction, the reward loop runs uninterrupted. We binge, we scroll, we swipe, we consume. But rarely, truly, do we arrive. Because the system wasn't built for arrival, it was built for motion. The motion of the hunt, the risk of the unknown, the gamble of effort and reward. Without these frictions, the reward loses texture, it flattens, and so we chase harder. Not because we want more, but because what we have no longer satisfies. In this sense, modern desire is not truly about acquisition, but about escape. Escape from boredom, from stillness, from the discomfort of emptiness. We do not crave things, we crave states. A momentary spike in feeling, a shift in chemistry. A sense, however fleeting, that we are alive and that this aliveness is meaningful. But the deeper irony is that desire, when fulfilled too easily, collapses upon itself. What once required patience, risk, and restraint now arrives instantly. A meal delivered in minutes. Validation in likes and comments. Eroticism in high-definition simulation. Novelty at the swipe of a thumb. There is no delay, no resistance, no waiting. And without waiting, there is no tension. Without tension, no build. Without build, no climax, only repetition. So the system adapts, not by recalibrating our hunger, but by intensifying it. Marketing evolves into behavioral engineering. Entertainment becomes infinite scroll. Pornography becomes algorithmic. Food becomes hyper-palatable. Nothing is enough because enough was never the point. The system runs not on satisfaction, but on perpetual near-satisfaction. On the whisper that the next thing, just after this, is the one that will finally complete us. It never does. And so we return, again and again. Not because we are weak, but because we are exquisitely, tragically well adapted to an environment we no longer live in. Yet amidst this compulsive loop, something ancient stirs, the memory of true reward. Not the quick fix, not the simulation, but the earned satisfaction, the feast after the famine, the fire after the storm, the embrace after longing. These were rewards the body understood. They were contextual, grounded in effort and time and rhythm. They made sense to our physiology. They were metabolized not just by the stomach, but by the soul. Today, these rhythms are rare. We live in a state of constant input, rarely punctuated by true need. Our brains are flooded but undernourished, stimulated but unsatisfied, and so arises a quiet ache beneath modern life, not just for pleasure, but for friction, for challenge, for slowness, for a hunger that means something. This is why fasting, silence, solitude, and struggle have returned as spiritual practices. They are not regressions. They are attempts to reset the circuitry, to remember what it feels like to want and to wait, to endure discomfort, to metabolize desire instead of numbing it. But here, too, lies a trap, because even the rejection of desire can become its own form of hunger, for purity, for discipline, for moral superiority. We begin to desire not desiring, and so the cycle continues, refined, spiritualized, disguised, but still driven by the same engine. So where does this leave us? With a choice, perhaps, not to eliminate desire, that would be both impossible and inhuman, but to understand its nature, to see it not as an enemy, but as a signal, a compass pointing not outward, but inward. What do we want, really? What are we chasing? And what are we afraid will happen if we stop? Desire, at its root, is not about things. It is about connection, to the body, to others, to meaning. It is the force that moves us toward life. But like fire, it must be contained, or it consumes. So perhaps the question is not how to satisfy desire, but how to sanctify it, to treat it not as a bottomless pit, but as a sacred hunger, to feed it with patience, with presence, with the understanding that not every craving is a command, and not every fulfillment is freedom. Because in the end, the metabolism of desire was never designed for endless stimulation. It was designed for a world of rhythm, of seasons, of stories. And perhaps in returning to those rhythms, even briefly, we rediscover a version of desire that does not deplete, but deepens. We often speak of the body as a possession, my body, your body, as though it were a passive object we carry, direct, and command. But the truth, quietly unsettling and easily overlooked, is that the body is not truly ours in the way we imagine. It is not a machine waiting for instructions. It is not a silent vessel obeying thought. The body has its own agenda, its own intelligence, its own autonomous systems that function with or without our awareness, and often in direct contradiction to our will. The heart does not ask permission to beat. The lungs do not wait for consent to breathe. The gut makes decisions before the mind even registers a reaction. We like to believe the mind is the sovereign, the pilot in control. But most of what we experience as self is built upon a platform of unconscious, automatic processes governed by a complex web of chemical, neural, and cellular negotiations. Even emotions, those deeply personal tides of feeling, are not conjured by conscious choice. They rise from the body like weather. Hot flashes of fear, a cold wave of grief, the slow bloom of desire. The brain responds, interprets, constructs a narrative around these bodily states, but it does not generate them from nothing. They are, in many ways, bodily proclamations, signals from a creature older than thought, demanding recognition. Consider the immune system, a decentralized network capable of identifying, remembering, and attacking invaders with extraordinary precision. It learns, adapts, recalibrates, and yet we are rarely aware of its choices until we fall ill. Likewise, the enteric nervous system, the so-called second brain in the gut, contains over 100 million neurons, more than the spinal cord, regulating digestion, emotion, and even mood. It communicates directly with the brain through the vagus nerve, shaping how we feel, what we crave, how we respond to stress. And still, it acts without our knowledge. as if the body were having a conversation with itself in a language we only occasionally overhear. This autonomy of the organism poses a deep philosophical question. If so much of what we are is shaped by processes we do not control, then where exactly does the self begin? Are we the thinkers of our thoughts, or merely their observers? Are we the authors of intention, or the product of internal negotiations too ancient to name? From a biological perspective, the body is not unified. It is a dynamic coalition of systems, cells, and signals that work together, and sometimes against each other. Cancer, for instance, is not a foreign invader. It is the body turning on itself, cells breaking from cooperative protocol and multiplying without limit. Autoimmune disorders are the immune system misfiring, mistaking self for enemy. Depression, in some cases, may be inflammation misrouted to the brain. The very systems designed to preserve us can also unmake us, not through malice, but through misalignment. Evolution never promised harmony. It delivered function, enough to reproduce, to survive, to carry the code forward. And sometimes the strategies that serve one part of the organism do so at the cost of another. Testosterone may increase reproductive success in men, but also elevates risk-taking behavior and cardiovascular strain. Estrogen supports fertility but can increase susceptibility to certain cancers. Even pregnancy, the biological apex of reproduction, is immunologically paradoxical. The body must suppress its own defenses just enough to not reject the fetus as foreign, yet not so much as to let pathogens thrive. Every function is a balancing act between cooperation and autonomy, between the body as one and the body as many. If we look closer, the sense of the body as a unified, obedient whole begins to unravel. At the genetic level, the human organism is not singular, it is a mosaic. Some of our DNA comes not from our direct ancestors, but from archaic humans like the Neanderthals, fragments inherited through ancient interbreeding. Within us, mitochondria, tiny powerhouses inside cells, carry their own DNA, a remnant of bacteria that entered into symbiosis with early life forms over 1 billion years ago. Even now, our existence is sustained not by our cells alone, but by trillions of microbes living in the gut, on the skin, in every cavity of the body. Together, they outnumber our human cells. They digest our food, regulate our immunity, influence our moods, strip them away, and we collapse. So when we say my body, what do we mean? The borders blur. The organism is not one, but many, a collective masquerading as an individual. History has long wrestled with this paradox. Ancient physicians believed the body was governed by humors, blood, bile, phlegm, each with its own temperament. Modern science replaced this with systems, circulatory, nervous, endocrine. But the intuition was not wrong. The body has always been a parliament of forces, each with its own vote, each capable of dissent. What we call illness is often nothing more than conflict, one faction of the body rebelling against another. And what we call health is a fragile truce. Society mirrors this biological truth. Just as the body is not truly singular, neither are we as individuals. We are shaped by invisible currents of culture, by languages we did not invent, by traditions carried in stories long before our births. Our autonomy is always partial. Just as the heart does not consult the brain to beat, we do not consult our ancestors before repeating their rituals, but we do it nonetheless. The self, whether biological or social, is never absolute. It is emergent, negotiated, contingent. Yet we cling to the illusion of control. We tell ourselves that we decide what we eat, who we love, how we live. But the body often decides first. Hormones surge, cravings whisper, instincts rise, and only afterward does the mind craft a story to justify them. We like to think we steer the organism, but more often we are steered by it. The stomach dictates mood. The immune system shapes energy. The microbiome influences appetite. The body moves and the mind follows, constructing the illusion of sovereignty. This realization can feel unsettling, even humiliating, but it also offers a strange liberation. If the body is not entirely ours, then neither are its failures entirely our fault. The panic attack, the autoimmune flare, the depressive episode, these are not moral weaknesses. They are negotiations gone wrong inside a complex and autonomous system. The task is not to dominate the body, but to listen to it, not to conquer, but to collaborate. And perhaps this is the deeper lesson. Autonomy was never the point. Cooperation was. The body is not one voice, but a chorus. Civilization, too, is not one mind, but a multitude. Harmony does not come from erasing difference, but from orchestrating it. The organism is not a machine that belongs to us. It is a community that includes us. To live wisely is not to command it, but to participate in it. So the question emerges, if the body is not entirely ours, can we ever claim to be fully ourselves? Or are we, like the body, just temporary agreements, patterns of cooperation, fragile alignments of forces, waiting always for the next shift in the tide? It begins not with triumph, but with fragility. Imagine a group of early humans on the African savanna, the midday sun punishing, the air shimmering with heat. In the distance, an antelope darts with impossible speed, hooves striking the earth like drumbeats. By every measure of strength, the hunters should fail. They are slow, clumsy, their muscles weak compared to the predator cats that share the plains. Yet they keep moving, step after step, hour after hour. They do not chase with speed, they chase with persistence. And as the antelope sprints and sprints again, its muscles flood with heat, exhaustion mounting. The humans, dripping with sweat, panting heavily, continue. Not faster, but longer. In the end, the antelope collapses not from tooth or claw, but from fatigue. This is persistence hunting, the fragile body outlasting the strong. We assume strength means brute force, the speed of the cheetah, the power of the gorilla, the bite of the crocodile. By those measures, humans are pitiful. A chimpanzee has nearly twice the muscle density of a man. A horse outruns us. A wolf outbites us. Our skin is thin, our nails useless, our teeth modest. Evolution seems to have left us defenseless. But here lies the reversal. It is precisely in our weaknesses that our unique power was forged. Take running. We are terrible sprinters but extraordinary marathoners. No other mammal can chase in heat as long as we can. Why? Because of our very fragility. We have no fur, no thick coat to trap heat. Our skin, though vulnerable, is covered in sweat glands, millions of tiny pores leaking salt water, cooling us as we run. Other animals overheat. We endure. Our upright posture, so damaging to knees and spines, also frees our lungs and arms, turning our whole body into a long-distance engine. The very flaws that cause joint pain in old age are the ones that once allowed our ancestors to run prey to the ground. Or consider our skin. Compared to other primates, it is naked, fragile, easily torn. Yet this thinness is an evolutionary paradox. It exposes us, yes, but also transforms us. Without fur, we regulate heat better. Our skin becomes a surface for signaling, blushing with embarrassment, paling with fear, glowing with health. Later it became a canvas for culture, scars of initiation, tattoos of identity, painted colors of war or ritual. What seemed like weakness, bare, unprotected flesh, became a field where biology met meaning. Even in raw strength, we fall short. The average chimpanzee could overpower the strongest human in a contest of muscle, but strength is not everything. What we lack in force, we overcompensate with coordination. No chimp builds cities, no gorilla writes laws. Their bodies may dominate, but their minds remain solitary. Ours, by contrast, are designed for cooperation. Speech, gesture, shared attention, these became our claws and fangs. A single human is weak. A group of humans bound by language and trust becomes formidable. And so the question arises, is weakness really a disadvantage? Or is it the seed of something else? Because frailty forces connection. A child helpless for years requires not just a mother, but a network. Siblings, elders, allies. A wound, unlike in the wild, does not mean death if others carry you, feed you, heal you. From weakness grew the impulse to support, to teach, to share. Out of vulnerability came society. Seen this way, weakness is not the opposite of strength. It is its hidden foundation. The fragile joints that ache in age are the same joints that once carried us across plains. The thin skin that bruises easily is the same skin that cools us in heat and reveals our emotions. The frail muscles that lose against a chimp are the same muscles that free our brain to focus on something greater. Cooperation. Weakness compels us to find strength not in isolation, but in interdependence. And this leads us to a paradox. Humanity's greatest advantage is not that we are stronger than other creatures, but that we learn to live with being weaker. Our survival did not come from dominance, but from endurance, connection, imagination. Fragility became fuel, and perhaps that is the essence of what it means to be human, not to triumph by force, but to turn every limitation into possibility. So the question lingers. If weakness gave rise to our greatest strengths, then in a world where civilization cushions us from most of our vulnerabilities, what becomes of us? Does the fading of weakness also mean the fading of our will to transform? If persistence hunting and thin skin were the first revelations of strength through weakness, then the story of human cooperation is the next. Imagine again that same savanna. A wounded hunter stumbles, an injury that for any solitary predator would mean death. A lion with a broken leg does not recover. A cheetah that cannot sprint will starve. But a human with a twisted ankle? The group can carry him. They can share food. They can give him time to heal. In that act of care, weakness does not destroy. It binds. And in the long term, this binding becomes culture. Weakness forced humans to invent language. A lone chimpanzee can scream, gesture, even deceive, but it cannot sustain abstract conversation. Humans, fragile in their bodies, needed a new survival tool, the capacity to plan across time, to coordinate hunts, to share knowledge of dangers. Language was born not from luxury, but from necessity. The body was too vulnerable to survive alone, so the mind created a web of connection to compensate. What once seemed like a flaw, our inability to fend for ourselves in infancy, our reliance on others for protection, became the catalyst for civilization itself. The thin skin that revealed fear through blushing also revealed trust. To show your emotions on your face is biologically a risk. It makes you transparent, predictable, exploitable. But that very transparency is what allows for cooperation on a massive scale. If I can see that you are angry, ashamed, honest, or joyful, I can coordinate with you more deeply than with any other animal. Our weakness became our honesty. Our honesty became our strength. Even in comparison with our closest relatives, the paradox is clear. Gorillas can lift enormous weights. Chimpanzees can tear branches apart with raw force. But their societies fracture at scale. Dominance hierarchies keep them small. Humans, by contrast, use weakness as a reason to rely on one another. We create laws, rituals, shared myths, tools that amplify cooperation far beyond the limits of biology. A chimpanzee alone is stronger than a man. 100 men together can build bridges, cross oceans, shape empires. Weakness, multiplied by cooperation, becomes power. But weakness also leaves a mark. Our knees, which carried us across plains, now ache with arthritis. Our spines, evolved for walking upright, curve painfully with age. Our skin, so useful for cooling, becomes prone to cancer under the same sun. Our reliance on one another, which once guaranteed survival, now also breeds vulnerability. Without community, many humans collapse into loneliness, despair. Every strength has its price. Every weakness carries its paradox. And so we are left with an unsettling but liberating truth. The human body was never designed to be strong in the way we imagine strength. It was designed to transform weakness into opportunity, to take the fragile and make it fertile, to turn limits into leverage. Perhaps this is the deepest irony of all, that the species which dominates the earth is not the fastest, nor the strongest, nor the fiercest, but the one most willing to live with its own fragility, the one that turned thin skin into communication, aching joints into endurance, helpless children into culture, the one that made weakness not a flaw to hide, but a foundation to build upon. And the question that follows is as old as myth. Is it truly better to be strong or to be weak in just the right way? If fragility gave birth to our greatest strengths, then maybe the measure of humanity is not how much we can resist breaking, but how beautifully we can build when we already know we are breakable. When an archaeologist kneels in the dust and brushes soil from a fragment of bone, they are not uncovering mere matter. They are opening a page in a book written without ink. A femur cracked in childhood and healed crooked tells of survival and care. A molar worn flat reveals a lifetime of chewing tough roots. A rib with lesions speaks of tuberculosis stalking ancient lungs. The body is not only flesh, it is a journal, and time is its ink. We tend to think of memory as something stored only in the mind. But memory resides in the body long after thought is gone. Bones and teeth carry inscriptions written by hardship, diet, labor, disease. They remember what no historian witnessed. They remember what no written record captured. The common assumption is that history lives in monuments, scrolls, libraries. But the truest archive lies beneath our skin. It is carried in the skeletons we leave behind, the scars that fossilize into evidence. And it is here that the reversal emerges. Even our suffering, our flaws, our illnesses become testimony. They are not erasures of life. They are signatures of it. Arthritis, for instance, is not a modern affliction. It is etched into the spines of Egyptian mummies, the knees of Neanderthals, the shoulders of medieval peasants. A bone thickened by strain tells us of fields plowed, of stones carried, of endless repetition of labor. Cavities in teeth whisper of the agricultural revolution when humans shifted from meat and roots to grains rich in starch and sugar. The first sweet harvests brought the first rotten smiles. Every disease is a chapter. Leprosy marks medieval Europe with stigma and isolation. Syphilis, spreading across oceans, rewrites the story of colonial contact. Tuberculosis reshapes cities, influencing architecture to let in air and light. Even now, cancer is not just a disease, but a storyteller. It tells us that we are living longer, that our cells divide more times than our ancestors ever did. Illness is not only tragedy, it is history embodied. Compare then the skeleton of a chimpanzee with that of a human. At first glance, they are strikingly similar. The same bones, the same joints arranged in familiar order. Yet the subtle divergences tell an epic tale. The widened pelvis of the human reveals the burden of upright walking. The elongated legs speak of distance crossed. The curved spine tells of compromise, of a body adjusted awkwardly to bipedal life. Each difference is a word in the sentence of evolution, and together they spell a story that reshaped the planet. What, then, is the body if not an archive? Not a flawless archive. Pages rot, bones break, flesh decays, but one vast enough to outlast memory. Every skeleton in the earth is a library, waiting for someone to learn its language. And our own bodies, even as we live, are writing their chapters. The callus from a lifetime of labor, the scar from an accident, the wrinkles from years of sun. So perhaps the body is not only what carries us through life, it is also what carries life beyond us. Not as spirit, but as evidence. And the paradox is this. We spend our years trying to hide weakness, yet it is weakness that history remembers. A fracture, a cavity, a lesion. These survive far longer than beauty or strength. And the open question remains, if our bodies are archives, then what story are we leaving behind? And who, one day, will read it? If bones and teeth are the pages, then the body's diseases are its marginal notes, scribbled not by intention, but by necessity. Each ailment marks an encounter between biology and environment, a dialogue that becomes legible only in hindsight. Consider rickets, the the softening of bones caused by lack of vitamin D. In northern Europe, when industrial soot darkened skies and blocked sunlight, entire generations grew with bowed legs, their skeletons silently recording the cost of coal. In the New World, syphilis spread rapidly among populations that had never encountered it before, reshaping bones, scarring skulls, leaving unmistakable traces centuries later. Even plague has left its mark in the genomes of survivors, who carry genetic adaptations shaped by mass death. Disease is not only pathology, it is archive, evidence of humanity negotiating with the invisible. The skeleton is not passive. It remodels itself constantly, absorbing shocks, healing fractures, responding to labor. Farmers' bones thicken in the legs and arms from repetitive strain. Archers' shoulders grow asymmetrical. Women who bore many children carry widened pelvic scars. To the untrained eye, these are defects. To the anthropologist, they are stories. They reveal diet, workload, division of labor, even social inequality. A wealthy aristocrat buried with jewelry may carry bones free of heavy toil, while a peasant's skeleton groans with compression fractures. The body remembers what society forgets. Even teeth, the hardest substance in the human body, are storytellers. Enamel rings freeze moments of malnutrition in childhood. Dental wear reveals diet, grit from grinding stones, fibers from wild plants, sugars from early agriculture. The first appearance of cavities maps precisely onto the rise of farming communities. What looks like decay is actually data. Each tooth is a diary, written not in ink but in enamel. When we compare the human skeleton to that of a chimpanzee, the differences at first seem small. Yet these small differences hold the weight of history. The chimp's arms, long and powerful, tell of climbing and swinging, of a life in trees. The human's legs, straighter and longer, tell of endurance on the plains. The chimp's narrow pelvis supports quadrupedal movement. The human's wider pelvis accommodates upright walking and difficult childbirth. The chimp's skull, projecting forward, houses powerful jaw muscles. The human's rounded cranium, enlarged at the top, houses a brain that rewrote the world. In these millimeters and angles, in these tiny divergences of bone, lies the great split that shaped civilization. Our skeletons may look fragile compared to theirs, but it is this fragility that allowed us to build worlds beyond the body. So the body is not simply biology. It is a palimpsest, a layered manuscript written and rewritten by time. Archaeologists read it with brushes and microscopes. Doctors read it with X-rays and scans. We ourselves read it every morning in the mirror. Scars, wrinkles, gray hairs, each an annotation of a life lived. And like any archive, the body is incomplete, selective, prone to loss. Flesh decays, memory fades, but bones persist. In a sense, our species has always known this. That is why ancient burials are careful, ceremonial. To preserve the skeleton is to preserve the story. And yet, what story will future generations read in our bones? Will they see the arthritis of office chairs instead of plows, the curvature of spines bent over screens instead of fields? Will they read the trace of microplastics lodged in marrow, the chemical signatures of industrial food? Just as we read famine in the enamel of medieval teeth, they may read consumerism in ours. Our bodies are still writing, still archiving. The question is, what record are we leaving? So perhaps the most profound recognition is that our bodies are not just ours. They are messages sent forward in time, archives waiting to be opened. And in that recognition lies a quiet humility. We do not own our bodies fully. We only borrow them. And in the borrowing, we leave traces for others to decipher. The body is not only a vehicle for living, it is a document of having lived. And the paradox is that what seems weakest, disease, fracture, decay, is often what speaks most clearly. So we end where we began, with the body as a book, written in bone, in scar, in wear. A book no one chooses to write, but everyone leaves behind. A book that teaches us, again and again, that history is not only in monuments or words, but in the fragile, enduring matter of ourselves. It begins with an awareness no other animal seems to carry, the awareness of our own fragility. From the moment we are born, the human body declares its imperfection. Infancy is long, helpless, demanding. Childhood is full of accidents, scrapes, fevers. Adulthood is a negotiation with exhaustion, injury, decline. And yet what truly distinguishes us is not that we are weak, but that we know we are weak. We see mortality reflected in the body before us, and we recognize it as our own future. We imagine pain before it arrives. We anticipate the end before it comes. This consciousness of vulnerability is perhaps the first spark of culture. The common assumption is that humanity's achievements, religion, art, philosophy, come from curiosity or ambition. But another possibility emerges, that they were born from fear. Confronted with sickness, with death, with the sight of a still body that once breathed, humans could not simply walk away. Where an animal leaves its dead to rot, we stay, we weep, we bury, we mark the ground. The first graves filled with flowers and pigments are not about utility, they are about meaning. They are our refusal to let fragility have the final word. And here lies the reversal. It is precisely because we are so flawed that we create. Pain forced us to seek medicine, loss forced us to invent ritual, helplessness forced us into communities where survival meant cooperation. If the body were perfect, immune to disease, invulnerable to injury, immortal, would we have needed stories, prayers, songs? Would we have sought transcendence? Or would we have lived like the great beasts, strong, silent, satisfied with the present, yet unable to imagine the beyond? From a biological perspective, frailty is not an error, but a design. The body's failures push us outward, toward one another, toward invention. Archaeology shows us that the earliest art coincides with the earliest burials. Cave walls painted with ochre, stones arranged around corpses. These are not random acts. They are attempts to grapple with fragility, to turn weakness into identity. The trembling hand that paints an animal on the wall is the same hand that trembles in grief. Both gestures come from knowing we are breakable. In modern society, the same paradox endures. Hospitals, cathedrals, universities, these are monuments not to strength, but to weakness. Every advance in medicine is an admission that the body fails. Every act of philosophy begins with the recognition that we do not understand. Every work of art is a response to loss, longing, limitation. The cracks in the human form are the cracks through which meaning enters. So the question is not whether weakness diminishes us, but whether it defines us. What if humanity itself is the child of imperfection? What if the fragility we despise is the very reason we became who we are? And what would we lose if our bodies were flawless? Perhaps in chasing perfection, we risk erasing the very thing that makes us human. Imagine for a moment a world where the human body had no weakness, where bones did not break, skin did not tear, hearts did not falter, and minds did not fear. At first glance, it seems a paradise. No pain, no illness, no aging, no loss. But what then would become of us? Would there be tenderness if no one ever needed help? Would there be medicine if no one ever fell ill? Would there be art if no one ever mourned? In such a world, survival would not demand cooperation, and perhaps empathy would wither into irrelevance. We might be strong, yes, but silent, solitary, and empty of culture. This is the counterpoint that anthropology whispers. Human identity is not built in spite of imperfection, but through it. The infant, helpless for years, teaches the tribe patience, care, language. The sick elder, fragile in body, becomes the repository of stories and memory, valued not for muscle, but for wisdom. The dying companion calls forth ritual, belief, philosophy. In every case, weakness births something beyond survival. It births meaning. Compare this to the animal world. When a zebra falls, the herd moves on. When a chimpanzee dies, the group may linger briefly, but soon disperses. There are no graves, no names, no monuments. Humans, by contrast, resist forgetting. We etch names in stone, build cairns, carve statues, compose elegies. We transform loss into memory, memory into culture. In this refusal to let death erase, weakness becomes the soil from which identity grows. History itself can be read through this paradox. Plagues devastate societies, but also accelerate medicine and social reform. Wars shatter bodies, but inspire literature and art. Disability, once seen as limitation, often becomes the source of new perspective, new invention, new forms of beauty. The violin was shaped to mimic the human voice, not to surpass it. The novel was born from the recognition that life is finite and fragile. Even religion across cultures begins with the same tremor, the awareness of mortality. And so fragility is not a flaw to be eliminated, but a condition to be acknowledged. To be human is not to escape weakness, but to live meaningfully within it. The cracks are not simply scars, they are openings. They are how compassion enters, how imagination takes shape, how identity is formed. Thus, the paradox resolves. What we most fear, our breakability, our imperfection, is precisely what binds us together, drives us forward, and lifts us beyond instinct. If we had been flawless, we might never have needed each other. But because we are flawed, we became a species defined not just by biology, but by story, culture, community. And so, the open question remains. In our pursuit of perfection, through medicine, through technology, through dreams of enhancement, are we preserving humanity or dismantling it? If weakness made us human, what will become of us when weakness is gone? It begins with something deceptively ordinary. A man in his 30s, sitting at his desk in a glass-walled office. His life is not threatened. There are no predators stalking him, no famine lurking at the edge of the village. And yet, his stomach twists as if danger were near. A dull ache sharpens into chronic pain. The doctor calls it gastritis, the result of stress. But the real trigger was not starvation or attack. It was an email. A few sentences glowing on a screen, carrying neither claw nor fang, yet powerful enough to send his adrenal system into chaos. Cortisol, the ancient hormone of survival, floods his bloodstream. What once mobilized hunters to flee lions now mobilizes office workers to answer deadlines. The body, ancient and earnest, cannot distinguish. To it, an email is a predator. The common assumption is that stress is an individual failure, a matter of resilience. Some people just can't handle pressure, we say. But biology tells another story. The stress response is not new. It is one of the oldest mechanisms we carry. A spike of adrenaline, a surge of cortisol, the heart pumping harder, muscles tightening, digestion pausing, all designed to save a life in moments of danger. For most of human history, these bursts were short, a sprint away from threat, a fight for survival, a tense negotiation with nature. Then they ended. The body returned to balance. But in modern life, the trigger never leaves. The lion has become perpetual. The email, the boss, the algorithm, they stalk us daily, endlessly. And so the stress response, once an ally, turns traitor. What was meant to save us begins to erode us from within. Ulcers, hypertension, weakened immunity. This is the reversal. Our bodies are not weak. They are too strong, too loyal to the scripts of prehistory. The problem is not that stress hormones malfunction, but that they work exactly as they should in an environment they no longer fit. The mismatch between ancient design and modern pressure transforms survival chemistry into chronic illness. At the root of this lies the brain's most social habit, comparison. Our ancestors lived in bands of 50, perhaps 150 people at most, the size of a village fire circle, a clan, a tribe. Within that scale, comparison was manageable. You knew your rivals, your allies, your place in the hierarchy. But the 21st century shattered those limits. Social media exposes us to thousands of others at once. Every scroll is a new reminder of someone wealthier, fitter, more beautiful, more admired. The brain, built to compare within a tribe, now compares within an endless marketplace. And so it never rests. It interprets likes as status, comments as approval or rejection, followers as proof of worth. Cortisol rises not from hunger but from envy, not from threat but from endless mirrors. The body thinks it is fighting for survival, but in truth it is drowning in comparison. Other species, too, live in groups. Baboons organize in troops with complex hierarchies. Dolphins form pods where cooperation and alliance are vital. Their brains, like ours, have evolved to manage social relationships. But there is a difference. No baboon wakes up to compare himself with 1,000 other baboons outside his troop. No dolphin measures her worth against strangers across the ocean. Only humans, with language and technology, have expanded the circle so far that the brain collapses under its own evolutionary gift. The social mind, designed to keep us safe in groups, now keeps us restless in crowds too large to fathom. So perhaps the real problem is not biology, but culture. Our stress is not proof that our bodies are broken. It is proof that our culture exploits the very systems meant to keep us alive. Consumerism thrives on comparison, always showing us what we lack. Social media thrives on envy, always highlighting what others display. Competition is no longer a burst of effort in the hunt. It is the constant background noise of life. The body has not betrayed us. We have built a world that betrays the body. And yet, within this paradox lies a hidden truth. Healing may not come only from medicine or therapy, though both are essential. Healing may come from community, from the rediscovery of safe circles, groups where eyes are not weapons but mirrors of trust. The body does not want to be alone. It does not want to live in perpetual comparison. It wants the intimacy of the campfire, the quiet of belonging, the rhythm of familiar voices. To cure the stress of the modern world is not only to calm chemistry, but to restore context. To remind the body it is not hunted, not judged, not alone. And so the question opens, what would our health look like if we treated community itself as medicine? If, instead of seeing stress as weakness, we saw it as the body's plea for a circle it was designed to live in? If we listen closely, the story of stress is not only written in hormones, but in history. For thousands of years, the human body lived in rhythms: the hunt, the harvest, the feast, the famine. Stress was seasonal, cyclical, bounded by the rising and setting of the sun. A predator's chase, a drought, a battle between clans. These moments ended. What replaced them was rest, the laughter of a fire circle, the safety of shared food, the arms of kin. The body, though strained, was also restored. Today, the rhythm is broken. The sun no longer dictates our hours. Electric light and glowing screens extend vigilance far into the night. Deadlines, notifications, the quiet hum of comparison. They never cease. Our ancient physiology waits for a pause that never arrives. And without pause, the emergency system becomes permanent. This permanence is what modern medicine now calls chronic stress. Cortisol, intended for bursts, lingers. Blood pressure, meant to spike and drop, stays high. The immune system, meant to defend, misfires. The body is not weak. It is exhausted by loyalty to a past that no longer exists. And the tragedy is this: in the very societies that have reduced famine, predators, and physical danger, we have created a new predator inside ourselves, a predator of thought, of comparison, of endless striving. Other animals remind us of an alternative. Baboons, though hierarchical, resolve conflicts quickly. Tension is discharged, and the troop moves on. Dolphins, though social, thrive on play as much as on competition. Their stress is balanced by ritualized affection, touch, sound. Humans, too, are wired for such release. But in cultural systems where comparison never ends, where even rest is invaded by images of others' success, the release valve is jammed. Stress ceases to be an episode. It becomes identity. Yet it would be too simple to call this a biological trap. Biology has not failed us. It has given us extraordinary tools: empathy, cooperation, imagination. What distorts them is culture. In consumer society, scarcity is manufactured. Advertising whispers, "You are not enough." Social platforms whisper, "Others are ahead." Economics whispers, "Compete or be irrelevant." The body responds as it always has, with vigilance, with tension, with cortisol. The difference is that there is no lion to run from, no famine to outlast. Only the endless chase of status, invisible yet unrelenting. And still, the body carries its own wisdom. In recent decades, research into social neuroscience confirms what anthropology always suspected. Belonging itself is medicine. Safe relationships regulate cortisol. Laughter lowers blood pressure. Touch calms the nervous system. To be seen and accepted by a trusted circle literally changes physiology. Healing, then, may not come only from the pill bottle, but from the presence of others. A family that listens. A community that accepts. A circle where comparison dissolves into connection. The implication is radical. Stress is not just an individual burden, it is a cultural illness. Its cure is not only chemical but communal. The body cries out not for perfection but for safety, not for dominance but for belonging. What medicine names disorder may in fact be the body's protest against isolation, against endless judgment. So perhaps the task is not to rid ourselves of stress entirely. It is ancient. It will always be with us. The task is to reframe it, to let it arise in moments that matter, real threats, real risks, real efforts, and to let it dissolve when danger is gone. To live not in perpetual vigilance, but in cycles of tension and release, challenge and rest. This requires more than medicine. It requires reshaping culture itself. And so, the open question lingers. If the body was designed to thrive in tribes of trust, how can we build such tribes anew in a world of billions? How do we create spaces where the eyes of others heal rather than harm, where comparison yields not envy, but solidarity? Until we answer, the body will continue to remind us, through ulcers, through sleeplessness, through a heart that races at the sight of an email, that we are not meant to face life alone. It begins in the quiet hours, when the body lies still, but the mind ignites. Behind closed eyelids, entire worlds unfold. We flee from shadows. We speak to the dead. We rehearse arguments. We invent landscapes that vanish with dawn. Dreams. No other human experience feels so vivid and yet so untethered. Why do we dream? Some biologists argue that dreaming is evolutionary training, a rehearsal space where the brain simulates danger, practice for predators and social conflict. Others suggest it is random noise, the byproduct of neurons firing without purpose. Still others see in dreams the seeds of creativity, the unconscious mind solving problems too complex for waking thought. And yet, despite centuries of inquiry, no consensus exists. Each night, billions of bodies enter this hidden theater, and science still cannot explain the script. The common assumption is that the body is rational, efficient, a machine tuned by evolution for survival. But the existence of dreams suggests otherwise. Why would evolution waste so many hours in hallucinations? Why would natural selection permit us to spend a third of our lives in sleep, vulnerable, immobile? The dream defies the logic of pure efficiency, and that very defiance hints at a deeper truth. The body is not a machine designed by an engineer. It is a patchwork of experiments, a survivor of compromises, a witness to mysteries that remain unsolved. Take handedness. Nearly 90% of humans are right-handed. This is not random. It is evidence of asymmetry in the brain, where one hemisphere specializes in language, tool use, and fine motor control. But why this preference? Why not equal distribution? Some hypothesize that the tilt toward right-handedness emerged alongside language itself, as the left hemisphere gained dominance. Others suggest it was the result of an ancient mutation that spread across populations. Still others see it as a quirk, an evolutionary accident that persists not because it is useful, but because it was never harmful enough to be erased. Whatever the cause, it remains a global signature of humanity. a species tilted, literally, to one side. And beyond handedness, the body brims with unexplained variation. Some people can function on 4 hours of sleep, while others collapse without 8. Some have unusually long toes or ears that taper into points. Some experience synesthesia, hearing colors, tasting sounds. Others possess double-jointed flexibility or an uncanny resistance to cold. None of these traits fit a universal design. Instead, they reveal the truth. There is no standard template for the human body. There is only a spectrum of anomalies, mutations, peculiarities that accumulate across generations. Evolution does not sculpt statues. It molds clay, leaving fingerprints everywhere. The reversal is striking. We expect science to deliver certainty about the body, but often it delivers more questions. Why do we yawn? Why does laughter exist? Why do some people blush more easily than others? Why do we age the way we do, with hair graying before joints fail, or memory slipping before strength? Each of these mysteries suggests that the body is not optimized but improvised. Evolution does not need to make sense. It only needs to make survivors. And perhaps that is the point. The mystery itself may be part of the design. If natural selection is a tinkerer, not an engineer, then our bodies will always contain features that seem wasteful, puzzling, contradictory. Dreams may serve a function, or none at all. Handedness may reveal a deep neurological law, or just an ancient accident. The extra long toe or the odd sleeping pattern may not be flaws, but reminders that the body is not bound to logic, only to survival. And so the question becomes, what do these mysteries teach us? Perhaps that to explore the body is also to explore evolution. Every unexplained quirk, our dreams, our habits, our anomalies, is not just a personal oddity, but a story millions of years in the making. To study the self is to study the species, to ask why we dream, why we favor one hand, why our bodies vary so widely, is to ask what it means to be human at all. If dreams are the most familiar of mysteries, they are also the most intimate. Cultures across history have treated them as messages from gods, as visions of the dead, as prophecies. The Egyptians painted dream books on papyrus. The Greeks built temples where the sick would sleep in hopes of divine visions. Freud saw them as windows into the unconscious, Jung as messages from the collective human psyche. Science has since stripped away these metaphysical claims, and yet in the laboratory, the mystery remains. Why does the brain rehearse danger in a dream? Why does it return to certain fears again and again? Why do the faces of strangers appear stitched from fragments of memory? No theory is complete. The body continues to tell a story science cannot fully read. Handedness, too, is more than a neurological curiosity. It is cultural. In many societies, the right hand is linked to purity, law, order, while the left hand is stigmatized, tied to impurity, even witchcraft. Language encodes this bias. The Latin dexter means both right and skillful, while sinister means both left and ominous. A small biological asymmetry becomes magnified into cultural meaning, shaping laws, taboos, rituals. A quirk of the brain ripples outward into philosophy and myth. What began as biology becomes identity. And then there are the anomalies that defy even pattern. The people who never seem to get cavities. The families with extraordinary longevity. The rare individuals who do not feel pain, or who heal faster than expected. These cases are often treated as outliers, but they remind us that evolution does not operate with blueprints. It works with chance, with mutation, with improvisation. The human species is not a finished design. It is a draft still being written. The common assumption is that science should resolve these mysteries, that the body is a puzzle waiting to be solved. But perhaps some mysteries are not errors to be corrected. They are evidence of the imperfect nature of evolution itself. The body was never meant to be rational. It was meant to be viable. Dreams may waste hours, but if they do not prevent survival, they persist. Handedness may tilt a population, but if it does not harm reproduction, it remains. Anomalies, quirks, deviations, these are not flaws. They are the fingerprints of evolution's indifference. And yet, there is beauty in this indifference, because it means that to study our bodies is to peer into deep time, into the experiments of nature that shaped us. Each strange feature, each unexplained behavior, is a trace of survival written in flesh. Our dreams connect us to ancestors who once dreamed by firelight. Our handedness links us to the first toolmakers. Our quirks, our ears, our toes, our odd habits, carry echoes of choices and accidents made long before history began. So perhaps the mystery is not a problem to be solved, but a gift to be preserved. The body resists full comprehension not because it hides the truth, but because it is the truth, messy, contingent, full of gaps. To explore the mysteries of the body is to accept that human life is not a clean equation. It is a story, full of loose threads, unanswered questions, paradoxes. And maybe that is what it means to be human, not to master the body, but to wonder at it. So we are left with an open question. What will we discover next in ourselves? Not as a conquest of knowledge, but as a recognition of how much remains unknown. To study the body is not only to map its certainties, but to live with its enigmas. And in that living, we discover not just biology, but the long, unfinished narrative of evolution itself. It begins with a clock no one can see. Tucked inside the brain, in a cluster of neurons near the hypothalamus, lies the suprachiasmatic nucleus, a timekeeper older than civilization. It ticks not in seconds, but in rhythms. A cycle of roughly 24 hours, tuned to the rising and setting of the sun. This circadian clock regulates hormones, sleep, temperature, immunity. It decides when we wake, when we hunger, when we heal. But unlike a wristwatch, this clock cannot be wound by hand. It listens to light. And in the world of our ancestors, that was enough. The fire faded, the stars appeared, the dawn returned. The body aligned itself with the sky. The common assumption is that human mastery of light freed us from nature's rhythms. With fire, with candles, with bulbs, with screens, we extended the day into the night. But this freedom is double-edged. The same artificial light that lets us work past sunset also confuses the ancient clock. Night shift workers live in constant jet lag, their bodies misaligned with the sun. Blue light from devices tricks the brain into thinking dusk is not dusk at all. Cortisol rises when it should fall. Melatonin stalls when it should flow. The result is not just fatigue, but vulnerability, higher risks of depression, weakened immunity, metabolic disorders. The ancient clock still ticks, but it ticks against the rhythm we impose. And here lies the reversal. Sleep, so often dismissed as wasted time, is one of evolution's most stubborn features. For millions of years, sleep has made us vulnerable, lying still, unguarded, unable to hunt or flee. Why then did natural selection preserve it? The answer is found not in the body's weakness, but in the brain's need. Sleep is not absence, but labor. It clears metabolic waste from neurons, consolidates memories, stabilizes emotions. To deprive a body of food weakens muscle. To deprive it of sleep unravels the mind. Soldiers kept awake lose judgment faster than they lose strength. Students who cram without rest remember less than those who sleep. Sleep, inconvenient as it seems, is indispensable. And yet not all species sleep alike. Dolphins let half their brains rest while the other half swims, surfacing for air. Migrating birds nap in mid-flight, seconds at a time, micro-sleeps stitched together. Some animals hibernate, compressing months of slumber into seasonal rhythms. Sleep, then, is not a single script, but an adaptation, customized to ecological need. What is universal is the need itself. No complex animal escapes it. The body demands pause, but in human society, pause has become suspect. The industrial age equated productivity with worth. The glow of the factory, then of the office, then of the smartphone, turned night into another opportunity for work. To sleep is to fall behind. To rest is to risk being called lazy. We boast of sleeplessness as though exhaustion were a badge of honor. and yet the body, indifferent to ambition, still shuts down. Now, yawns arrive. The eyelids fall. The circadian clock whispers its ultimatum. You are a creature, not a machine. So perhaps the deeper paradox is this: rest is not weakness, but resilience. To align with the cycle is not regression, but wisdom. Just as evolution preserved sleep against the odds, so too must we preserve it against our own illusions of mastery. To sleep well is to remember what the body has always known, that renewal requires surrender, that survival requires pause. And so the open question lingers. In a world that never turns off, can we learn again to turn off ourselves? If sleep is so essential, why do we continue to resist it? The answer lies not only in technology, but in culture. In agrarian societies, sleep followed the rhythm of the land. People rose with dawn, rested at dusk, napped during midday heat. But with industrialization came clocks, factory bells, schedules detached from the sun. Time ceased to be cyclical. It became linear, sliced into shifts, measured in wages. The biological clock was forced to obey the mechanical clock, and in this new order, sleep became expendable. To close one's eyes was no longer simply to rest. It was to lose time, to lose money, to lose status. Modern science, however, confirms what evolution already knew. Sleep is not idleness but investment. Studies show that immune cells proliferate more during deep sleep, wounds heal faster, emotional regulation strengthens. Dreams themselves may be rehearsals, as some theories suggest. The brain simulating social conflict, danger, opportunity. Even nightmares may have adaptive value, forcing the body to rehearse survival in imagined crises. If so, then sleep is not retreat, but preparation. Its apparent inconvenience is its genius. The diversity of sleep strategies across species reinforces this truth. Consider the dolphin, with half its brain awake, half at rest, an elegant compromise between vigilance and recovery. Or migratory birds, which catch seconds of sleep in flight, proof that rest can be fragmented yet still essential. Even insects show rhythmic cycles of activity and pause. In every corner of life, evolution has found ways to integrate rest. The only constant is the need for it. And yet, in human culture, this truth is obscured. We celebrate the entrepreneur who sleeps 4 hours a night, the student who studies until dawn, the worker who sacrifices weekends. We call them disciplined, tireless. But beneath the applause is a cost measured in burnout, depression, immune collapse. Sleep debt accumulates like hidden interest, until the body demands repayment in the form of illness. To ignore sleep is to defy biology, and biology always wins. Perhaps then, the problem is not simply medical, but philosophical. We have confused activity with value, forgetting that pause is part of rhythm, that silence is part of music. Sleep is not absence of life, but one half of its cycle. To surrender to it is not laziness, but alignment. It is to admit humbly that we are not above nature but within it. The paradox is clear. We treat sleep as weakness, yet it is one of the strongest threads binding us to survival. The body, in its wisdom, preserves this vulnerability because it serves a deeper resilience. To rest is to trust. To trust is to belong, and to belong is to endure. So the open reflection remains. What if evolution's greatest lesson is not endless striving, but knowing when to stop? To learn how to rest, deeply, regularly, without shame, may be the most radical form of survival in a culture that never sleeps. To lie down, close the eyes, and enter the timeless rhythm of dreams is not regression. It is a return to the ancient clock that still ticks within us, patient, insistent, reminding us that to live is also to rest. It begins with something as small as a pair of glasses, 2 thin lenses, a frame, a tool so simple we barely notice it. Yet for millions of people, those lenses are the line between clarity and blur, between function and limitation. Glasses do not cure the eye. They compensate for its flaws. And in that quiet compensation lies a profound shift. The body no longer dictates the limits of life. Technology does. From glasses to antibiotics, from pacemakers to prosthetic limbs, from vaccines to fertility treatments, humanity has built a scaffolding around the body, a second layer of survival. We are no longer creatures who simply endure our biology. We are creatures who rewrite it. The common assumption is that this is progress without cost, that every pill, every implant, every surgical technique is an unqualified victory. But evolution never worked this way. Where there is gain, there is loss. A body shielded from natural selection may grow dependent on its protections. Corrective lenses allow genes for myopia to spread unchecked. Life-saving medicine allows traits once fatal to persist in the gene pool. What once would have been filtered by survival now continues. The question emerges, are we preserving humanity or reshaping it into something altogether new? The reversal is clearest in the age of genetics. With CRISPR, we hold in our hands the power to rewrite DNA, to snip out the errors of inheritance, to prevent cystic fibrosis, Huntington's, sickle cell anemia. Diseases that haunted families for generations may be erased with a single intervention. But what begins as healing tempts us further. If we can remove disease, why not enhance ability? Stronger bones, sharper memory, taller stature, tailored appearance. The line between therapy and enhancement blurs. What once was survival becomes design, and the designer is no longer nature but us. Other species adapt too, but they do so gently, incrementally, within the frame of biology. The Arctic hare grows a white coat in winter, brown in summer. The chameleon shifts pigment to blend with its surroundings. These are adjustments honed by evolution, reversible, balanced. Humans, by contrast, intervene at the level of code itself. We do not wait for generations. We edit the script in real time. It is the difference between weathering the tide and reshaping the shore. The power is dazzling, but it is also perilous. To edit genes is to gamble with futures we cannot yet imagine. So the counterpoint must be asked, if the body is flawed, do we have the right to perfect it? Medicine's task is to heal, yes, but what if healing drifts into manufacturing? A world where children are not born but engineered, where difference is erased, where variation, the raw material of evolution, is eliminated in pursuit of an imagined ideal. Would we still be human, or would we be artifacts of our own ambition? And perhaps the deeper paradox is this: progress demands restraint. Intelligence, the very trait that allows us to challenge biology, must also teach us when to stop, to know enough to act, but also to know enough not to act. For maybe the summit of evolution is not transcendence over the body, but reconciliation with it, to use technology not to erase our biology, but to walk beside it, not to reject the flesh, but to honor its fragile, enduring story. And so the open reflection lingers. Will the future of humanity be written in code or in compassion? Will our triumph lie in surpassing the body, or in finally learning to live wisely within it? Consider the paradox of survival extended too far. In the wild, every species is filtered by mortality. The weak fall, the strong reproduce, and the cycle continues. But humans, with our medicines and machines, have broken this sieve. Children once lost to infection now grow to adulthood. Hearts once stilled by arrhythmia now beat on with pacemakers. Lives once cut short by organ failure now continue through transplantation. These are victories, undeniable and profound. Yet in protecting ourselves from natural selection, we also carry forward every genetic fragility, every imperfection once culled by chance. Technology has become our new environment, and in that environment, survival is no longer the measure of the fittest but of the most inventive. Nowhere is this more vivid than in the debate over gene editing. For the first time in history, we can look at DNA not as destiny, but as text. Letters to be rewritten, errors to be corrected. Parents dream of children free from disease. Scientists dream of eradicating suffering at its root. But behind these dreams lies a shadow. Who decides what is an error? What is undesirable? What should be erased? Sickle cell anemia shortens lives, yes, but the gene that causes it also confers resistance to malaria. Erase the flaw, and you may erase the hidden strength. Evolution is full of such compromises. In our eagerness to fix, we may break balances too subtle to perceive. Animals change, but they do so in ways bounded by their context. The polar bear grows thick fur, the camel stores fat in its hump, the moth shifts wing patterns to avoid predators. These are adaptations sculpted slowly, tested by environment, spread only if they serve survival. Humans leap past this patient rhythm. We do not adapt to disease, we attempt to eliminate it. We do not wait for stronger bodies, we imagine designing them. The difference is not scale but philosophy. Nature selects, we intervene. Where nature compromises, we dictate. The danger is that in seeking perfection, we may strip away the very resilience that comes from imperfection. This is why the counter-argument matters. Perhaps the body is not a mistake in need of correction, but a story in need of acceptance. Fragility is not failure. It is memory, pain, limitation, disease. They are not random punishments, but residues of history. To erase them, wholesale risks erasing the record of evolution itself. Medicine is essential, yes, but when it turns into manufacturing, humanity risks dissolving into artifact. What we call flaws may be the very things that tether us to one another, that make us dependent, compassionate, inventive. To eliminate every weakness is to risk eliminating the source of our humanity. And so the challenge for intelligence is not simply to innovate, but to discern, to know the boundary between healing and hubris, to recognize when intervention saves life and when it steals mystery. Perhaps the final stage of evolution is not a body freed from all limits, but a mind wise enough to live within limits, to use glasses, but still honor the eye, to use surgery, but still respect the flesh, to use genetics, but still preserve diversity, to let intellect walk beside biology, not tower over it. The question remains, will the future be one where humanity engineers itself beyond recognition, chasing a mirage of perfection? Or will it be one where intelligence learns its hardest lesson, that enough is not weakness, but wisdom? It begins with a thought that no other animal seems to hold, the recognition that one day we will die. A gazelle flees the lion, but it does not carry the knowledge of its eventual end in its bones. A bird startles at shadow, but forgets the fear the moment the sky clears. Only humans walk through the world with this double vision, one eye fixed on the present, the other on the horizon of mortality. We are fragile, and we know we are fragile. We will age, weaken, vanish, and we know this as surely as we know hunger or thirst. This awareness is both wound and privilege, curse and gift, for from it arises not only anxiety, but philosophy, ritual, art. The knowledge of imperfection is the beginning of meaning. The common assumption is that suffering is evidence of error, that pain, weakness, death are flaws in the body's design. Yet biology suggests otherwise. Pain is not a defect, it is a message. It signals injury, infection, imbalance. A body that cannot feel pain is not superior, it is endangered. There are rare children born with congenital insensitivity to pain. They chew their tongues, burn their skin, break bones without noticing. What looks like perfection, freedom from suffering, is in fact a lethal silence. Pain, however cruel, is proof of life. A body that hurts is a body still resisting, still alive enough to warn itself. Here lies the reversal. What we call imperfection may be the essence of humanity. To hurt, to weaken, to grieve, these are not just failures. They are signals that bind us to one another, that force us into medicine, compassion, art. If we did not feel weakness, would we build hospitals? If we did not face death, would we carve gravestones, write elegies, compose symphonies of loss? What we despise in the body is the very soil from which culture grows. Other species remind us of the price of imagined perfection. The sea urchin, armored, barely feels pain. The jellyfish, nearly immortal, drifts through millennia without memory. They are enduring, yes, but also silent. No poetry, no community, no longing. If perfection means invulnerability, then perfection also means emptiness. To be human is not to escape fragility, but to transform it into meaning. And yet, the dream of immortality persists. Technologies promise longer lifespans. Gene editing whispers of disease-free generations. Philosophers speculate about minds uploaded to machines. But the counterpoint cannot be ignored. If we were immortal, if our bodies knew no failure, would we still feel urgency, tenderness, love? Would a kiss matter if there were infinite tomorrows? Would a song touch us if loss were impossible? It may be that death itself, dreaded, denied, delayed, is what sharpens life into meaning. The finitude of the body is the condition for the infinitude of spirit. So the open reflection emerges. Perhaps the greatest miracle is not perfection, but awareness of imperfection. To stumble, to ache, to age, to die, and to know it, is the essence of humanity. The body is flawed, but the mind that recognizes the flaw turns it into philosophy, art, prayer. No other animal mourns its dead, dreams of gods, asks why. We are imperfect, but we know we are imperfect. And in that knowledge lies our strange, fragile greatness. If suffering is a signal, then mortality is the final message. Every wrinkle, every ache, every faltering heartbeat is a reminder that the story has an end. And yet, instead of silence, humans answer this reminder with an explosion of meaning. Where other animals simply die, we invent ceremonies, funerals with flowers, tombs carved in stone, prayers whispered into the dark. Archaeologists find bodies buried with beads, tools, ochre, the first evidence not of survival, but of symbolism. Death, the great imperfection, becomes the first teacher of culture. The assumption that a flawless body would be better falters when examined. Imagine an immortal creature, incapable of illness, immune to pain. Would it form families, knowing bonds could never be broken? Would it compose poetry, knowing time could never steal youth? Would it build temples, paint myths, write philosophy, knowing eternity erases urgency? To feel limited is to feel compelled. To know we are temporary is to crave permanence, in memory, in art, in legacy. Imperfection is not the obstacle to meaning, it is its catalyst. Other species remind us of the limits of perfection. The Turritopsis jellyfish, capable of biological rejuvenation, lives endlessly by reverting to youth, but it has no society, no song, no sorrow. Its immortality is aimless. Humans, by contrast, live briefly, but leave echoes that outlast the flesh. A novel, a cathedral, a lullaby. These survive because the body does not. In this sense, weakness is not the enemy of humanity. It is the condition of humanity. Still, the temptation of transcendence grows. Medicine extends lifespans. Technology dreams of artificial bodies. Philosophers imagine digital consciousness. But even if these dreams come true, the paradox remains. Would such beings still be human, or something else entirely? If the essence of humanity is to know our imperfection, then perfection may erase the very self it seeks to preserve. So perhaps the deeper wisdom is this: to embrace imperfection not as a flaw, but as identity. The aching knees after a long climb, the fragile lungs that gasp for breath, the strange visions of dreams, the inevitability of death, all of these make us ask questions no perfect being would bother to ask. Why do we live? What do we love? What will remain when we are gone? Only a creature aware of its incompleteness would ask such things. And in that awareness lies our dignity, not in conquering weakness, but in transforming it, not in denying mortality, but in shaping life around it. The miracle is not that we are imperfect. The miracle is that we know it, and still we create, we connect, we hope. So the open reflection remains. To be human is not to transcend the body, but to live fully within it, imperfect, fragile, finite, and therefore capable of meaning. It begins with a question whispered across ages. What does it mean for a body to be well designed? Engineers speak of efficiency, symmetry, optimization. But nature does not work as an engineer. Nature improvises. A trait that looks elegant in one context becomes disastrous in another. Take pale skin in northern latitudes. It allows better absorption of sunlight and thus vitamin D. Yet in tropical sun, that same trait increases vulnerability to cancer, or sickle cell anemia, deadly in its severe form, but in its mild form, protective against malaria. There is no absolute good design. There is only design in context. The common assumption is that evolution drives species toward perfection, sculpting bodies ever closer to an ideal. But biology tells a different story. Evolution is not a march toward better, but a dance with circumstance. What survives is not the strongest, not the most beautiful, not even the most intelligent. What survives is what fits, and fit is always relative. To the forest, the desert, the ocean, the city. What looks like weakness here may be strength there. What looks like imperfection today may tomorrow prove essential. This is the reversal. The human body is not flawed. It is adapted. It is not obsolete. It is situated. We call our joints fragile, yet they carried us across continents. We call our immune system imperfect, yet it has withstood plagues that felled empires. We call our brains restless, yet that restlessness forged philosophy and science. Success, in evolutionary terms, is not dominance, but persistence. And by that measure, our species, scattered across every continent, surviving ice ages and pandemics, is astonishingly successful, but perspective deepens when we look beyond ourselves. Consider insects, tiny and countless. Ants may live only weeks, but as colonies they have endured for over 100 million years. Consider whales, immense and slow, living in oceans for centuries. Both ant and whale are evolutionary triumphs. Both thrive, though by opposite strategies, one through smallness and multitude, the other through size and longevity. There is no single model of good design. Diversity itself is the proof that success wears many shapes. The counterpoint, of course, is unsettling. If there is no standard of perfection, are we left adrift? If the body has no ultimate design, then what do we measure ourselves against? But perhaps this is the wrong fear. No standard does not mean no direction. Each species, each body, each life pursues success within its own context. For the cheetah, speed. For the tortoise, endurance. For the whale, scale. For humans, adaptability. To be well designed is not to conform to a universal blueprint, but to thrive in the niche where one stands. And maybe this is the deepest paradox of all. The body itself is not the miracle. The miracle is that we can question it, that we can look at our fragile knees, our fickle hearts, our limited senses, and ask, why this way, not another? Out of that questioning came medicine, art, civilization. Out of dissatisfaction came invention. Out of imperfection came meaning. No animal wonders whether its body is well designed. Only humans do. And that wonder, born of weakness, sharpened by comparison, fueled by restlessness, is perhaps the greatest design of all. So the open question lingers. If there is no perfect body, only bodies that fit their times, what does it mean for us to fit ours? And will our true strength lie not in what our bodies are, but in our endless drive to ask why they are this way at all? When we call the human body imperfect, we are often comparing it to a fantasy, a body without flaws, a machine without wear, a design without compromise. But such fantasies never existed in nature. Every organism is a bundle of trade-offs. The giraffe's long neck allows it to reach the highest leaves, but makes drinking water awkward and risky. The peacock's tail dazzles potential mates, but slows escape from predators. Even the cheetah's speed comes at a cost. Fragile bones, short bursts only, exhaustion after seconds. Perfection is an illusion. What exists are bargains, advantages purchased with risks, gains balanced by losses. From this lens, the human body is not a failure, but a master negotiator. Our upright posture strains the spine, yes, but it frees the hands for tools. Our large brain drains energy, yes, but it allows imagination and speech. Our lack of fur exposes us to cold, but it grants us mastery of sweat and heat endurance. Every complaint about our body hides its hidden benefit. What seems weak is often the foundation of our greatest strengths, and history shows that good design changes with circumstance. In the Ice Age, bodies with higher fat storage thrived. In times of famine, shorter stature was efficient. In modern times of abundance, those same traits become burdens, linked to obesity and disease. What once saved lives now threatens them. Design is never final. It is always provisional, always conditional, always in conversation with environment. Other species teach us humility in this regard. Insects succeed not by size or power, but by sheer adaptability. They occupy deserts, forests, cities, even our homes. Whales succeed by slowness, conserving energy in vast oceans, living centuries in balance with their environment. Humans succeed not because our design is superior, but because it is flexible. We can survive in tundra and tropics, in caves and skyscrapers, in scarcity and abundance. Our design is not perfection of form, but versatility of mind. So what, then, is good design? Not symmetry, not flawlessness, not optimization in the abstract. It is simply this: the ability to endure, to adapt, to persist. By that definition, the human body is well designed indeed, not because it is free of weakness, but because it transforms weakness into survival. The fear remains. If there is no single standard, are we condemned to drift without measure? Yet this fear overlooks the lesson of life itself. No standard does not mean no meaning. It means many meanings. Each organism is measured against its own environment, its own path. Success is not absolute, but relational. To live well is not to embody an ideal, but to embody a fit. And to fit is not to be perfect, but to be enough. And perhaps the greatest irony is that our dissatisfaction, our sense that the body could be better, is itself part of our design. It is what drove us to sharpen stones, to sew skins, to build fires, to invent medicine. If we were content with our bodies, we might never have become human in the cultural sense. Our imperfections force us to ask, to wonder, to create. The miracle, then, is not that we are flawed. It is that our flaws have made us seekers. So we end with an open reflection. The human body may never be perfect, but perhaps perfection was never the goal. The gift lies not in flawless design, but in the ability to question design itself. We are creatures who know we are incomplete, and in that incompleteness we find the drive to evolve, not only in flesh, but in meaning. It begins, as always, with the body. The skeleton that holds us upright, the muscles that carry us, the hormones that surge and fade, flesh and bone, vulnerable and perishable. And yet, inside this temporary vessel stirs something extraordinary: awareness. Consciousness that does not merely feel, but knows it feels. A mind that suffers pain and then asks why. A heart that loves and then wonders what love is. The body is matter, but within it blooms a question. And that question is the beginning of the human journey. The common assumption is that our identity resides in strength, our hands that shape tools, our brains that calculate, our tongues that speak. But perhaps identity lies not in these instruments, but in the awareness behind them. Muscles lift, but awareness lifts meaning. Bones endure, but awareness endures memory. Hormones surge, but awareness turns them into poetry, prayer, philosophy. The body is vehicle, fragile and finite. The journey is the mind that travels within it. Here lies the reversal. Though evolution gave us bodies adapted for survival, its true gift was not flesh, but reflection. Other animals live, reproduce, die, some with elegance, some with ferocity. Only humans pause to ask, who am I? Why am I here? Why must I die? Out of those questions arise myths, religions, philosophies, sciences. Out of the ache of flesh emerges the architecture of meaning. The diadem of humanity is not strength of limb, but depth of self-awareness. Language is the clearest evidence of this transcendence. Genes transmit biology, but words transmit memory, culture, imagination. A body dies, but its stories live on. A cave painting endures longer than the hand that brushed it. A song survives longer than the voice that sang it. In this way, humans escape the prison of DNA. We are bound by biology, yet we extend ourselves through narrative. Fire warms only the body. Story warms the soul across centuries. No animal has ever left such echoes. And yet the counterpoint insists, can we ever truly transcend the body? Consciousness soars, yes, but hunger drags us back. Philosophy contemplates eternity, but illness interrupts with fever. Imagination dreams of immortality, but the heart eventually stops. We may speak of transcending flesh, but every thought still depends on neurons firing, on oxygen-feeding cells, on blood-carrying nutrients. The body is not a shell we can shed. It is the ground from which every idea grows, and perhaps that is the final paradox. The body is frail, but it is precisely this frailty that makes thought precious. If we never tired, would we need rest to dream? If we never died, would we crave meaning in our brief days? If we never hurt, would we create music to soothe? Out of limitation springs beauty, out of flesh comes spirit, out of mortality comes story, so the open reflection remains. The human body may be flawed, clumsy, temporary, but it is the starting point of all that is not flawed: love, art, wisdom, faith. A weak heart writes a sonnet. An aching hand paints a masterpiece. A dying body composes a symphony. Imperfection does not silence us. It is the reason we speak. If the body is fragile, then consciousness is fragile's echo. A broken bone heals, but a broken memory may not. A heart attack scars tissue, but grief scars thought. And yet, it is this vulnerability that fuels creation. Out of suffering came medicine. Out of longing came religion. Out of wonder came science. No cathedral was ever built by a creature certain of its strength. No poem was ever written by an animal blind to its own end. To be human is to live at the border between biology and meaning, between flesh that decays and a mind that refuses to accept decay as the final word. The legacy of evolution is not merely a body that can run, grasp, reproduce. It is a body that tells stories about itself. We are the first species to narrate our own existence, to look in the mirror of thought and ask, what am I? This capacity is not extra to survival, it is survival extended into another register. For when bodies falter, stories carry on. A skeleton crumbles, but an idea inspires. A hand falls silent, but a book speaks for centuries. In this way, we have learned to live beyond the body without ever leaving it. Consider again the paradox. Tools, language, culture, these are extensions of us, but they do not replace us. A computer can calculate faster than any brain, but it cannot suffer, cannot hope. A machine may one day mimic language, but it does not long to be understood. Only the fragile body houses this restless desire for meaning. The same neurons that tire and fail are the neurons that imagine eternity. The same lungs that falter with age are the lungs that once sang. The very limits we dream of escaping are the limits that make dreaming possible. But the counterpoint remains. Perhaps we never truly escape. No matter how high thought climbs, it depends on the ground of biology. When neurons die, thought dims. When oxygen ceases, awareness dissolves. Even our highest flights of philosophy and art are tethered to the pulse of a heart, the breath of lungs, the chemistry of cells. Consciousness may seem to transcend the body, but it is rooted in it. To dream of being pure mind without body may be to misunderstand what mind is. Not a ghostly essence, but the body reflecting upon itself. And perhaps this is the final lesson. The body is not merely the prison of thought. It is the birthplace of thought. Without pain, no compassion. Without death, no urgency. Without weakness, no community. Without imperfection, no humanity. The body is not only the limit of our existence, it is the condition of it. So we end where we began, with paradox. The body is clumsy, aching, mortal, and yet, from it arises philosophy, music, love. It is weak, but it dreams of strength. It is finite, but it imagines infinity. It is doomed, but it creates. And this is the miracle. Not that we are perfect, but that we know we are not. And still, we choose to hope, to tell stories, to reach for the stars. So the open reflection remains. What greater wonder could there be than a fragile body that knows itself fragile, and yet, in that knowledge becomes something more?